We're bummed. You're probably bummed. But I'm sure she's watching from home, so maybe we can all say hi, Salvatrice, real quick. Hi, Salvatrice. I don't know if that made her feel good, but that was purely for my amusement. Thank you. That calmed me down a little bit. She has sent some written remarks, which I'll read a little bit later in the morning. But to kick off today's conference, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dr. Erica Androjonas, Superintendent and President of Pasadena City College.
Thank you, and I want to echo Leslie's comments. I can't tell you how much Salvatrice is very bummed not to be here, because she has put so much work into this, and to not be able to be here is tough. So good morning, everyone. All right, so I know there's people out there in Zoom land, and I know they can't say good morning, even though I expect it. As Leslie said, I'm Dr. Erica Androjonas. I'm the Superintendent President here at Pasadena City College, and it is absolutely my honor to welcome everyone to the fourth installation, or the fourth year of this conference. And it's one of those examples of time flies when you're having fun, because 4 years ago, I was still in my first year here when we had the first conference, and it does not seem possible. But then there's always the before COVID and after COVID, so, there's no sense of time. And I say that as a historian, by the way. So today's event is exactly what the Los Angeles Regional Consortium and the LARC, as we call it, the CEOs will be here. We'll be meeting right after this conference. This type of conference is exactly what the LARC was created to do. It is to host local partners from across the workforce world, to have a vital conversation about the future of our efforts together. I am pleased to welcome the Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation here, and we'll hear later from Stephen Chung. California Competes. Representatives from Los Angeles County are also here, and members of the California Community College Chancellor's Office, as well as practitioners, educators, leaders focused on getting our students into the workforce. And I believe I have one trustee here. I have Dr. Steve Gibson is our trustee back there. He's waving his hand. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Gibson. I don't think I see anyone else. And I also want to acknowledge that we have Pasadena City Councilman Andy Wilson with us. He represents our council for the next 4 weeks. Not that he's counting. He's actually been counting. Actually, he and I were waiting to be part of the Pacific Oaks President's investiture ceremony. And I think at that point he started counting, and that was what, 3 years ago? Councilman Wilson, just saying. Anyway, in many ways, we are at a rubber meets the road moment. Changes in the air. We do have a little thing called an election happening today. Hopefully everybody here has voted in person or sent their ballots in. The program today gives us a valuable chance to look at some important topics from different angles. The bane of our existence, if you work in the community colleges right now, is declining enrollment, especially among our low-income students and our students of color. And we need to continue to ask ourselves, we need to continue to focus our energies on how we stem that tide. We're also going to be looking at career mobility strategies, and in particular, how do we increase work-based learning opportunities and improve employer engagement. And it's funny, when you talk to folks out there, talk a lot with workforce development folks and talk about employer engagement, they say, well, what does that mean? What is employer engagement? And really, employer engagement is about helping employers who need workers, and we know a lot of employers out there need workers. We need them to see us, community colleges, to see our region, to see all of these ways in which we can connect employers with the workers they need and do the training they need. That's what this type of event is about. We also need to talk about regulatory strategies, and basically What are the bureaucratic and regulatory obstacles that impede our efforts to better serve students? And we actually have Paul Little here from the Pasadena Chamber of Commerce, and I know he's always interested in how we get rid of bureaucracy and make things easier for people. Right, Paul? Am I right? That's right. All right. And then collaborative strategies. Now more than ever, we need to approach our work on a regional level to provide students with the training and opportunities they need in our local region. And for many years, you know, the CEOs in the room, colleges in the room, it was all about, no, it's our service area. So 10 years ago, if I were the president 10 years ago, what I would have been saying is, no, what's happening with the Pasadena Area Community College District? Here are our district boundaries. I need to make sure everything happens for those students in those boundaries. Well, it's not about that anymore. We have to take a regional approach because our students come to us from all over LA County and in some cases outside of LA County because they are mobile, right? Our students are mobile and we have to accept that and think about how do we take a regional approach. Let's not be about only our own regional area or our own service area, but how do we improve things for the region? So in closing, I want to recognize the team here at PCC that's put this conference together every single year. Again, Salvatrice, this was your brainchild and your effort, and we're sorry that you're not here with us. Narine Majikian, who is the Associate Vice President and Director of the Los Angeles Regional Consortium, as well as her awesome assistant, Grace. And Leslie Thompson, who already met, my favorite MC of self-deprecating humor. She is an amazing operations manager for our Economic and Workforce Development Program. Jacqueline Javier, who is leading our Freeman Center for Career and Completion. And then, of course, Cindy, Marty, and everyone else in the Economic and Workforce Development Office. So it wouldn't be possible for us to be here without everyone who does that work. So again, welcome and enjoy the morning.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Endojonas, for your support and leadership. So as stated, this is our 4th annual Future of Work Conference and our first in-person major event since the pandemic, that little COVID thing that happened. You might have heard about it or been stuck at home for 2 years. Our last 2 conferences have been virtual, so we're really excited to be here with you today, and we thank you for braving the rain and joining us. We have an amazing lineup of guest speakers and panelists who are going to be sharing their thoughts and wisdom with us, and we promise to move everything right along to finish by noon, unless I can't pace myself, and we'll be done by 11:15. I'm going to try to go slower. Okay. As we considered how we were going to reintroduce the Future of Work Conference in 2022, we decided to be more intentional about including student voices. And so we asked our colleagues down in strategic communication, strategic communication and marketing to hit the quad and get some student voices captured for us, telling us about their career goals and some of the barriers they're facing. And so we would take a minute now to hear their words. Do I advance again? Yeah.
Well, I'm looking to transfer hopefully to UCLA in about 2 years after going to PCC.
Become a social worker, expand my educational knowledge about working with children as well.
Most likely, like I said, jump into teaching, start with the little kids, build my way up.
I want to apply for some graduate degree program.
My professional plan after graduating is I want to make a startup.
My professional plan is to open up a business and to open it up in my community, to offer art classes for my community and a coffee shop.
I'm planning to transfer possibly to USC or UC, but we'll see how it goes.
By fall 2023, I hope to transfer to another university. I'm currently working on the applications. It's the application season.
I was gonna work at a government job, or maybe I was gonna or start my own business.
I really aim to help children and youths, young adults and stuff, especially with mental problems, because I've learned to help them with that already in my previous years of schooling.
My biggest obstacle would be money and time. I don't have money to support myself right now.
Since English is my second language, so it is kind of tough to study, to be honest.
The biggest obstacle would be to, it's not having a clear-cut path. You're still trying to figure out what you want to do in life.
Getting through law school, because law school is probably hard and you have to study a lot, and the biggest obstacle is probably passing the bar exam.
I think being able to even stick with school. I have a lot of years of schooling to become a psychologist.
The biggest challenge, I think, is English language ability.
I think it's just my anxiety sometimes and overwhelming.
I think my biggest obstacle is definitely going to be the lack of a clear and defined kind of route to that profession.
Balance both work and school, but also try to have a social life and have friends.
My biggest obstacle is to motivate myself every single day and try to find a way to improve myself.
Work balance, work and school balance life would be the biggest challenge, and being financially stable to focus on school.
My biggest obstacle is balance, because what they say, balance is the key of all things, but sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't.
I think it has to do with my own self-confidence, because right now I feel like I'm not at the ability to my classmates.
The biggest obstacle in achieving my career goal is probably my lack of planning. I'm not really too sure where to go besides my vague plan of what I'd like to do.
All right. So that's it. Yeah, for the students, for sure. Let's give it up for the students. So those are real world experiences, right? And myself, having been in the community college system for about 27 years, and the last few years in the economic and workforce development ecosystem here in LA County, I can see that probably resonates with a lot of you and a lot of your colleges or some of your other experiences, with themes such as a struggle to find clarity on goals and work-life balance, challenges with transportation, and direct asks for individual assistance and proactive support. We can all gain a better understanding of the kind of support students need as they navigate their journey towards the workforce. As part of today's conference, we've brought together a great lineup of experts and thought leaders who are going to help us paint a fuller picture on the barriers and opportunities around student success, and we invite you to be an active part of the discussion with us. But before we launch into our program, I did want to share a few written thoughts from our Vice President, Salvatrice Cuomo, who, by the way, texted me and said, thank you for saying hi. So she is watching, and I wanted to read her thoughts, because as Dr. Indra said, Salvatrice Cuomo's been the driving force for this conference and is very disappointed she couldn't be here in person. But these are her thoughts. Greetings, community members, friends, colleagues, and students, and welcome to the 4th Annual Future of Work Conference hosted by Pasadena City College. Although I am joining you today only in spirit, I am grateful for the opportunity to share a few words with you as we open this year's conference, which is focused on removing barriers to increase job placement and work-based learning. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers and panelists who are each bringing their unique perspective to our common challenges and their possible solutions. As the leader of Pasadena City College's Economic and Workforce Development Division, I am immensely proud of our team's work in organizing this conversation for our community. Too many of our students face obstacles to their college and career success. We are fortunate to have in our region a collective of talented and passionate EWD experts who pinpoint where things are going wrong and work together to innovate to address those issues. This morning, I invite you to reflect and ask yourself, how can policy and programs do more to center students in their design and implementation of work-based learning and placement? How can we build better relationships for our students, to employers, to mentors, and to each other? And how can we elevate social capital and developmental relationships to the same level of importance? There is no doubt that the pandemic disrupted our school operations and wreaked havoc upon the labor market. Hybrid models of work are now ubiquitous, and we will never go back to the way it was. Even before COVID-19, the labor market was not working for millions of young adults, particularly those without college degrees who were disproportionately in low-wage jobs or out of work. As we continue to navigate this health crisis and rebuild the economy, we should not look to the past, but instead build a labor market that provides new and ample economic mobility opportunities for everyone who needs to support themselves and their families. It is imperative that our schools, workforce development programs, government, business associations, and employers make work-based learning a focus of the recovery. We must do all that we can to push the envelope, improve program models, and embrace our hybrid world to foster connections, experiential learning, and high-value jobs for our students. Thank you for your continued support and dedication to this work, to our students, and to the greater Los Angeles region. Enjoy the conference. Thank you, Salvatrice. Okay. So now, it's my pleasure to bring to the podium a great friend to Pasadena City College, Dr. Soo-Jin Jez. Dr. Jez serves as the Executive Director of California Competes, an organization that develops nonpartisan and financially pragmatic recommendations for improved higher education and workforce policies and practices across California. Prior to joining California Completes, she served as the Associate Professor of Public Policy and Administration at California State University, Sacramento. She also served as the Director of CSU Student Service Network, Academic Advisor for the California Executive Fellows Program, and Associate Director of the Sacramento State Doctorate in Educational Leadership. Dr. Jez is also an accomplished researcher whose work appears in a variety of publications. Today, she'll be sharing her thoughts on how we can better foster connections between higher education and employers, and we are thrilled to have her. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Soo-Jin Jez.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am so happy to be here. At the Future of Work conference. And it's so critical, I think, to be thinking about this. I know it's a phrase I feel like people throw around a lot, but even just hearing the remarks already this morning and thinking about not just what are the needs for today, who are the students of today, but thinking about where do we think about for the future. And, you know, I'm not a hockey fan, but I like this quote. From Wayne Gretzky, who is a hockey player, but he says he doesn't skate to where the puck is, he skates to where the puck is going. So I think about that a lot and think about the work that we should be doing. All right. So thank you for having me here to talk about some of our research. Thank you, Leslie, for the introduction. Pasadena City College, Salvatrice, I don't know where the camera is for you, for the invitation, Jesse and Alma, Leslie mentioned that California Competes is a dear friend of Pasadena City College. We have a sort of deep leadership roots in Pasadena also. On our leadership council, former Pasadena City College president Jack Scott is one of our key advisors, former Mayor Bill Bogart, Representative Carol Liu, Huntington Library, technically not Pasadena, Steve Koblick, but we have a lot of love for this region and what's going on here. So I'm especially happy to be here today. So Leslie already did a good job sort of saying who California Competes is and what we do. I wanted to hit home sort of the way we think about the philosophy of this work, and that we view higher ed, as on the slide says, as both a vaccine and an antidote against economic stagnation and social stratification for individual Californians, our communities, and the state's economy. And we believe that for California to have long-term economic growth, we need shared prosperity. So how do we get to shared prosperity? How do we build more equitable opportunities? Today, all of us have come together to investigate these very questions. So I'll take us on a tour on some key data, starting with the demand for higher education and what people say it would take for them to enroll in higher ed, and the perceived value of education. And then I'll conclude by sharing some takeaways from our research that builds off the data that I'll share, and some interesting stuff that's happening in policy circles that are relevant for the rest of this morning. So let me step back and lay some groundwork. in general, the demand for higher education is pretty high. So our partners at Strata engaged Gallup to conduct a survey in 2019 that revealed the demand for higher education across our country. So we have data on the California sample, which Strata analyzed at our request. So here on this heat map, you can see the percent of people in our country ages 18 to 65 without a degree and not currently enrolled who said they need additional education. This is a real opportunity here. So as you can see, it varies across the country. It's pretty high across the country, and it is highest in California at 57%. Let me say that more clearly. Most Californians who don't have a degree and are not in higher ed say they need more education. We also have analyzed this similar data using college app data, and we find something similar. We find that there's nearly, oh gosh, I'm totally dropping, 1 in 5 Californians, period, say they intend to enroll in higher ed in the next 2 years. That's over 5 million Californians. So there is a huge demand and interest in going to higher ed. So on my drive to Pasadena from LAX, I took a Lyft. And whenever I'm out and about, I can't let my researcher hat go. I always ask people about their backgrounds, their interests, their career, how they settled there, their training. And so, of course, talking to the Lyft driver, I asked him, does he drive full time? About his career. And what he shared with me is he actually loves sports broadcasting. And that's what he really wants to do. And so I asked him, do you want to be a personality? The celebrity. He said, I would do anything, but I really love writing. And I was really struck by this. And I said, well, why aren't you doing that? And he said, well, you have to go to college for that. And I said, well, why don't you go to college? And he said, I have 2 kids. I have to provide for my family. How am I supposed to go to college? And he said, frankly, I was working with my dad in construction, getting paid under the table, but my body began to sort of give in. It was too hard. He was 26. So he started to drive for Lyft instead to make ends meet. I asked him, what would it take to get you into higher ed? I'll get there in a moment. So digging in a little bit more around the Californians who are interested, who say that they need additional higher ed or education, what did we find? So we see that the perceived need was highest among Hispanic and Black Californians at 67 and 58%. Also women, those with less than a high school diploma, and individuals living in urban areas. And frankly, it's pretty high for all groups and breakdowns. Even 43% of those with a bachelor's degree felt they needed more education. When those without a degree were asked, what would it take to get you to enroll? Nationally, they said they're looking for career advancement, college affordability, and college flexibility. More specifically, as you can see up top, the most highly rated driver was a guaranteed employment outcome, like a job placement or wage increase, followed by free community college tuition, and then courses that fit their schedule. So I'll go back to being in the car with Alex, my Lyft driver. When I asked him what would it take for him to return to school, he said, I would need to be able to pay my bills if I can make enough. And he hadn't realized that, in theory at least, there's financial aid that should help people pay for things like housing and transportation and food. And we're driving towards the total cost of attendance so that someone could go to college and be able to eat. I asked him how much does he think he would need to make that happen. So he added it up, his rent, his car payment, insurance, food, gas, and he estimated about $4,000 a month for $48,000 a year. So a lot more than what we typically have in financial aid and traditional higher ed financial aid, but not more than if we piece together some pieces more strategically. Or I think about the GI Bill, which is how I was able to go to college. The GI Bill, I live in the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is, depending on where you live, around $4,000. In San Francisco, closer to $5,000 a month for housing, plus tuition waive. But that's a reality that we knew, that this is what it takes for an adult to go to college. So what do we know so far from the Strata, the Gallup data? We know people want more education, they know they need it, and we need to make clear the labor market benefits, combined with the price that they can afford at times that they can go to class, will motivate folks, enable folks to actually enroll. All right. So what about after they've entered higher education? What matters? What are people valuing? There's a lot of headline news around the value of higher education, frankly, how it's not valuable. And I want to say, as a researcher, higher ed has never been more valuable than it is today. The returns to higher ed are large and growing. So conversations around the value of higher ed are really just, I feel like, I don't know, holiday dinner table conversations, but they're not reality. But perception of value matters, right? So let's look at, what do people perceive? So I'm going to talk first about the cost value, that my education, was it worth the cost? And how strongly people agree to that. And next I'll talk about the career value. So how did folks rate the cost value of their education? So students thought their education was worth the cost when pathways were closely aligned with careers. So as you can see, those who were in vocational programs, 62% strongly agreed that the cost was worth it. And I will say, this is, Gallup national data. In California, you could obviously have vocational programs at sort of any level. The way the survey designed was that these were shorter term vocational programs. And then you could also see the associate's degree and graduate degree having high levels of strongly agree also. And when I look at this, I think about ties to more professional degrees. And this aligns with a follow-up question they had in the survey, which isn't up there. But the fields of study with the best cost value were engineering, mechanics, health professions, education. And obviously, these are the fields of study more closely aligned with careers. Other things that they found was, not surprisingly, lower debt was associated with better cost value. Women and rural residents reported better cost value. And the cost value was lower or for more recent graduates. In other words, more recent graduates didn't feel like as much the cost of college was worth it. My sense of that is, it's getting hard for students, once they graduate, to transition into good jobs that pay good wages. And that is taking students longer and longer. So what about career value? So they asked folks, do you feel like your program was valuable for your career? Not surprisingly, vocational schools were also seen as providing high career value, as they should, literally what they're trying to do, along with graduate degrees, which makes sense too, because graduate degrees tend to be more specialized and related to careers. Not shown on this chart, but worth sharing that, again, majors typically align with careers, such as healthcare, engineering, computer science, are majors that showed the highest career value. The stronger the career connection, the higher the consumer value. Other things to note when we look at demographics: women, Black, and Asian Californians, as well as those living in urban areas, report the highest career value. So we're seeing a demand for credentials with a clear payoff for connections to high-quality jobs and careers. Oops. So we talked about how strong connections between education to work is important for students, that they rate it for cost value, career value, for their reasons for re-enrolling or enrolling in the first place. It also has implications for higher education, employers, and driving an inclusive economic recovery and future resiliency for this state. And I say this because we are facing a recession, right? The data is coming in, cash receipts are coming into our state. Hopefully our rainy day fund's big enough, but maybe not. So we need to be prepared because it's going to hurt Californians. So we think a lot about partnerships between higher institutions and employers being really, really central to this. So I wanted to hit home because for lots of folks, it's not obvious why we should think about connecting higher ed and employers. And so I wanted to take a moment for this. So for students, it's not only the increased clarity around educational and career pathways, but also strengthened career readiness skills needed in the labor market. There's no better way to know what you need to know to transition to that good job than to have that in your programs of study, and better job opportunities and outcomes. So we hear from employers and from students that that internship was really, really important, the work-based learning opportunity, the service learning. For higher ed institutions, a strengthened enrollment pipeline, right? If students are saying, we need to know that if I go to your college, it's gonna have a better outcome for me labor market-wise, if you have these partnerships with employers, these strong connections, students are gonna see that, and they're going to enroll at that institution in higher general. Increased equity and higher education access and success. The students that are struggling to get good jobs are first-generation students, students of color, who don't have as strong of social capital and career capital to have families, neighbors, relationships that can help them be placed into good jobs and into work-based learning opportunities. Improved outcomes for all students. I mean, there's actually a study that just came out that found when there's a public university in a community and more students go, it's not just the graduates that are getting paid more, it's also all the residents, those that didn't even go to college. So this is a huge benefit for the community as a whole. Greater clarity for the general public on the value of higher education, right? This is something I think that we're battling all the time, that it's just for the individual and not for society as a whole. And an optimized ability to serve as a vehicle for economic recovery and mobility for their community. So we at California Competes focus a lot on the role of higher ed in the economy, but the role of higher ed is really critical around things attached to the economy. So we think about good jobs, unemployment, but it's also, those good jobs as a teacher are also really important for our students in education. The healthcare provider, being a nurse isn't just a great job that pays well, but it also serves our residents in being able to have access to childcare. So it's important for communities being able to thrive. Employers want good workers, right? So these relationships are really important for, you could have access to larger and new cohorts of well-prepared talent. And then also for current employees, increase professional development opportunities, so that when you have someone on your team that needs to, learn a new data visualization software, you can say, look at Pasadena City College, take a course there, because you know they're there, you know they have a data analytics program. I just made that up, I'm sorry if you don't. For local and state economies, I feel like I've hit it home already, but you're gonna close this gap between workforce supply and workforce demand. You're gonna have more broadly based and stable revenues. A decreased need for social safety net programs, increased election day civic engagement, right? Folks with higher levels of educational attainment are more likely to vote, more likely to volunteer, more likely to be engaged in their community. So basically, partnerships between higher ed and employers is going to solve all of our problems. So we began to dig into this a little bit more because, I think higher ed gets this at least conceptually, everyone in this room, obviously. Employers do at least conceptually, but it doesn't really happen that much. And it's really, really hard work. So at California Competes, we want to get to a point where we figure out how do we make sure this is just part of existence for higher ed employers. But the first part is, what are the problems? And we hear the problems all the time. But what we wanted to do is, as researchers, be a little bit more rigorous around thinking about what are the problems to set up a framework so that we can move past this to move into solutions. So we did a study to look at what are the barriers for higher ed and employers to engage. And we're looking to do the next part of the study, which is what are the solutions? Like, how do we set up the context? And I want to flag that this is so hard, not just for the reasons you may think of, it's no one's job, I'll get to that kind of stuff, but also like everything in California, but particularly education in California, our education system is really complicated. And I don't need to tell everyone in this room, but I'm going to say it just because I wanted to like put it out there to put us in that same frame of mind. Higher ed in California, we have 3 public higher ed systems that are all not only governed separately, but governed differently. Right? The UCs are governed by the regents who have constitutional authority. They sit side by side with our legislature, who can't really tell them to do anything except as it applies to budget stuff. The CSUs that are sort of governed like a more traditional higher ed system with a central CSU chancellor's office that has a fair amount of authority, but also the legislature can come in and tell them to do stuff. And then the community college system, which is locally governed, right, largely. You also have a chancellor's office that has oversight, but really is, I feel like the chancellor's office is a big cheerleader, right, an advocate for you guys at the state. At least this is how I see it in my head. But there's no good way to sort of have a higher ed policy that impacts all 3 segments, right? And I don't know that we necessarily would always want that. They're designed in this way for rational reasons. And that doesn't even touch on the private institutions. California is one of maybe the only state that does not participate in like a national agreement around online higher ed providers. So we're sort of like, in some ways, a wild, wild west around private, for-profit, and online providers. And then we have a very robust private nonprofit higher ed sector. I mean, in Pasadena or around here, you have, Caltech, right? They're in a league of their own in many ways, a lot of our private nonprofits. But then we have so many other institutions that are very small. So it's so complex. And not to mention the business side of California, right? We have, a huge and robust small business sector, but we also have some of the world's largest businesses that frankly drive our state revenues. So as you can imagine, thinking about what is like higher ed and employer engagement in our state, it's, well, what, are you talking about Caltech or Pasadena City College? Are you talking about Disney, or are you talking about the coffee shop in the corner? And the answer is yes. So how do we think about connecting around that? So we really dug in to really understand, well, what are these barriers, and then how do we get to solutions? So the barriers, not surprising, probably. So the main barriers, and there were more, but the main barriers that we found that impede meaningful engagement from happening stem from misalignments in culture, structures, and values, which are cross-cutting, obviously. So culture we defined as a learned and shared way of being, behaving, thinking that influences engagement with external partners. And these can be formalized into organizational structures and processes, and are oftentimes reflective of organizational values. So what we saw around culture were largely post-secondary disinterest and deprioritization of students' workforce success. In this room, again, I'm speaking to the choir, but maybe you're dealing with this at wherever other institutions. But you could probably ask a campus, what's your student graduation rate? What percent of your students go on to earn good jobs that pay a living wage? Very fewer know that. Or even if you asked, I was a faculty member in a professional program, so we should have a good sense around what happens to students, like what jobs do your students get? I can name types of jobs, but I couldn't tell you what percent of our students went to work in the Department of Finance or a state agency when I was at Sac State. But we know other things about students because we prioritize those other things, but we're not prioritizing what happens to them in the workforce. And I will say the community colleges, on the whole, years ahead of the UC and CSU around this. Other aspects of the culture, the bureaucracy in higher ed is really challenging. It's there for a reason, probably quality protection, the controls, shared governance, all these things that are at the core in many ways of higher ed also make things more bureaucratic, and that is frustrating to employers. Structures. So we define structures as policies, procedures, processes that frame how, which type, and whether partnerships grow, launch, thrive. It's the connection of organization structure and function. So there were a lot here. Misaligned goals, incentives, and perspectives. So obviously, higher ed does not yet or community colleges do, I guess, in the student-centered funding formula. There aren't really big incentives, though, around getting students good jobs afterwards, nor goals, nor perspectives. Like, we don't get good data all the time around what happens to students unless your department is reaching out on their own, right? We might get some of the sort of mandated reporting to the state around wages from EDD, but it's not usually actionable. Shared spaces to connect. So this is one of the few that there are shared spaces to connect, whether they're physical spaces, like shared meeting rooms, or conferences, or other places where higher ed and employers will be together. But they're few and far between, and that really impacts the ability for meaningful engagement. The lack of ownership of partnerships. So another thing we saw is when partners want to come, when higher ed employers come together, they come together, but no one is sort of the person who is ultimately accountable for making this work. So that tends to be a lot of driving some of the misalignment. A lack of coordination and dependence on individual relationships. I mean, probably everyone in this room could think about a great partnership that existed, and the person who was driving it left, and then it fell apart. Like, this is the norm, right? There are lots of great partnerships happen, but they're not sustained, they're not structural, and so when that person leaves, so does the partnership. And then limited resources. So we see lots of these partnerships come together when there's money, and then when the money is gone, they dissolve, right? Or they come together as much as people can sort of pull together, but it's not core to either sort of organization. Third, last but not least, values. And we define this as understanding how partnerships will advance and inform a shared goal. So why value this work? And there are really three things that really stood out to us. That higher ed or the employers didn't really understand the value for themselves. So for higher ed, it was, I get we should do this in theory, but there wasn't a clear understanding, like, what does this get you? What's the benefit? What's the value to higher ed for engaging an employer? And for employers, likewise, that there wasn't clarity on, like, why this was valuable. And then the sort of flip of this we saw, that higher ed didn't understand why employers didn't understand the value for employers, and employers didn't understand the value for higher ed. And frankly, lots of times they thought they did, but they said things that actually didn't really seem to matter. So for example, higher ed, particularly community colleges, would oftentimes say, we can provide them with a diverse pool of candidates. I can tell you that I think 0 of the employers we interviewed said they wanted a diverse pool of candidates. They said they wanted a skilled pool of candidates. They said they wanted a broader pool of candidates, but they never said, we really need to diversify our pool of candidates, and that's why, we're reaching out to higher ed. So lots of times we saw not just not understanding their own value, but the opposite partner's value, they didn't get either. And then the final piece was nobody really understood even how to communicate their values, right? They just sort of went into the conversations around partnerships, assuming that we all get why we're here, let's do this. But then they didn't get why they were there, and they were wrong. And one could imagine, any sort of conversation around building partnerships, is you want to sort of understand what is our shared goal? What are our shared values? Why are we here together? And then move forward around those. All right, so what do we do? So in this study, we heard insights from folks. So we heard from folks, this is what we're doing to build meaningful partnerships. And so in the full brief, you can see the many things that folks are doing around these challenges. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them. So around values, identifying and building off shared interests and goals. I mean, this is obvious, but it just did not happen, frankly. So it really was starting off with that conversation that everyone thinks is probably a waste of time around, why are you here? Why am I here? Okay, how do we build that together? Don't skip that one. Related to culture, creating multiple roles across campus, particularly for faculty, that include cross-sector engagement responsibilities. So I say multiple roles because there's a lot of turnover in higher ed, so you don't want to or restructuring. you don't want like one person to be responsible, because that's what's going to happen is that person's going to be gone, that individual or that role, and then it's going to crumble. So you have multiple people, and also humans are kind of social, so they like to work together on things. And so you're just going to get better work if you have multiple people working together on a partnership to brainstorm together, right? And then calling out faculty, because faculty are the subject matter experts. They're the ones who are going to know, this is what we're learning in this program. This is the type of skills that my competencies that my students are going to have and bring into the workplace. And likewise, they're also the ones that could benefit from an employer saying, we're actually using this software, this method, et cetera now. I remember in my department, we talked a lot about, do our graduates need to know regression? I think we talked about this every faculty meeting for the 11 years I was there. But this is something where an employer could have told us, come in and said, hey, we don't actually use regression. You can stop making them take a year-long series on regression. But it's really important for faculty to have that relationship directly to really understand, am I teaching in my program the skills that are most relevant for my students? Third, structures. So building spaces, particularly at the regional level and by sector, that spark and nurture engagement between higher education personnel and employers. So one of the things that in 2014, 2016, I did a study of the state's economic workforce development program for the chancellor's office. And there were a lot of things that I said, but one of the things I really liked about it, it was really, I think, the first time the chancellor's office said, all community colleges don't need to do the same thing. In fact, you should do different things, and we should have these by regions. And I think that's really, really important to keep at the heart of this work, is that it should be regional, and it should be driven by sector or industry. Keeping an eye on time here. Okay. All right. Okay, so following up on that, so California Competes is really trying to drive and support regional work by sector. And what we need to do for that is break down silos, move towards intentional concerted efforts. And so through that work that I described, and then a lot of work that's happening going on right now that's launching is pretty exciting, and I want to talk about. So the K-16 regional collaboratives. Probably heard about this work. It's a state grant program, $250 million going down to regions to build connections between K-16 and work. So I know the LA Regional K-16 Collaborative was awarded in phase 1. I'm guessing many of you here are a part of it. I believe that this work stands to make long-term, long-lasting impacts that the partners can use to drive once the money is gone. And there's a number of other, I just flagged one, there's a number of other sort of state strategies that are regional that are happening right now. The Community Economic Resilience Fund, which ideally I think in concept should connect to this, and others that I'm forgetting right now. Also exciting around this work is the Learning Aligned Employment Program. So this aims to create more work-based learning opportunities for students, low-income students. It's also silo-breaking in a fashion because all K-16 collaboratives met with the California Student Aid Commission that administers the higher ed financial aid program to ensure that regional programs are aware and integrated with these efforts. And this program, I think, is also really interesting because it's not, in some ways people think about like, oh, it's work study, right? But it's not work study because it has to be aligned to the program of study. Students can work on campus, they can work with a nonprofit, they can work for a private business too. And the students' wages are subsidized to a different extent. So we will see how this rolls out, but I think it will be an exciting opportunity to engage students more in the world of work in a way that aligns with their programs of study. Also, I want to mention the Golden State Employment and Training Program, which is another state program that breaks down silos. So this is a program for Californians who lost their jobs during COVID, and want to get training at a higher ed institution, I think all public higher ed institutions are already sort of part of the list. Or if you're part of, I think they're developing maybe their own eligible training provider list for the Golden State Education Training Program. But what's interesting about this is that this is also being administered by the California Student Aid Commission, which is traditionally, the Cal Grant, traditional higher ed, financial aid. But it's not seeking out students who are applying to college. It's looking for California workers who lost jobs. So now you have a traditional higher ed agency doing work that would typically be under labor. So I think we're going to continue to see this moving together and recognition of higher ed's role related to work, and then also labor's work connecting to, oh yeah, we have this economic workforce development engine, the largest one in our country, but it's in this higher ed world, the community colleges. So I think we're going to increasingly see them recognize that we should be better leveraging the community colleges here. Right. And I can't not talk about this really exciting pilot that California Competes is engaged in. It's obviously a much smaller scale than a $250 million state program, or the Golden State Employment Training Program, which I think is $500 million. So California Competes is working with 4 community colleges in central LA, whom I think may be in the room, Compton College, El Camino College, LA Southwest, and South LA, and then also LA County 2nd District. And this is an effort to basically say, you know what, we have folks in our community who could be well served by higher ed, and we need to work together to build access for them and to get them through higher ed into good jobs. And all of us have an important role to work together around this. The recognition that it's not just one college's service area, that students go to multiple colleges. How do we weave them together, and how do we not compete? Right? How do we not say we need to have the biggest HVAC program? They've got 4 electives, we need to have 5 electives to get the students. That's not effective for residents, it's not a good use of money, and not a good use of community college staff time, frankly, to think about how do you compete with your neighbor. But also the county role, right? So it's not just the California Student Aid Commission that provides support for Californians to afford college, right? We have CalWorks, we have CalFresh. One thing I like to ask colleges with housing, do they take Section 8 housing vouchers? Every college I've asked has said, I don't know. Because they don't think about poor Californians as being college students, but we ought to be. And there's an op-ed by a community college, a Compton College student, Kaido, and he talks about his attempt, he loved engineering and physics, and his attempt to go to college and how he struggled with homelessness, drug abuse. He lost his custody of his children, went through a rehab program, and it was his county benefits administrator that said, hey, there's this program at Compton College you should check out. So he did it, got his credential, now he's in advanced manufacturing, has stable housing, has his kids back. But when we think about enrollment and getting people into our community college doors, a big part, particularly for older Californians, for adults, is the county. We do at California Competes a lot of work with student parents. I think nearly every student parent I've talked to has said they realized college was possible because of their CalWorks officer who said, hey, you could go to your community college, continue receiving benefits, and set yourself up and your kids up for a better life. So thinking about the county role as an important partner, not just as receiving benefits, but also as someone that could help direct students or residents to become students. So I'm really excited about this pilot. We are still in the research phase, but if anyone's interested, let me know, and we will keep you up to date on what's happening. So thank you to anyone here that has been interviewed by our team. We are I think in the close to 50-something interviews at this point. But we really hope that this work will help us understand how do you get community colleges to work together? How do you coordinate with the county? And then how do students work through these systems? We're also looking to launch similar work in the Bay Area. So if anyone's in the Bay Area and is interested in this work, come talk to me. We're hoping to start planning for that to figure out where this makes sense in the Bay Area. Great. So all of these sorts of things we see as working together to strengthen how community colleges and other post-secondary institutions, how counties, how the state government, how the sort of all the folks that have this shared goal of supporting Californians to get the training to lead to good jobs can work together instead of working in silos. All right, so up here we have a couple pictures of some of the work, the career readiness pilot, the employer engagement piece. We also have the other research that I had mentioned, the Strata research, the Get Ready research from College App on Demand, all on our website. Of course, I'm going to say sign up for our mailing list. That way you can get all of our emails and updates as they come out. Yeah, so thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to share some of our work, and I hope this sets up for a great panel that will come next.
Awesome. How about another round of applause for Dr. Sujin Jez? Thank you. Well, at this time, we're going to take a brief 15-minute break so you can, administer your bio needs or check your email or check your phone calls, scroll some TikToks, no judgment. Or if you're looking for suggestions, you might want to hit your social media and mention that you're at the Future of Work conference at Pasadena City College. Just saying, if you don't mind. Do as you will. We have snacks out front, and we'll see you in 15 minutes. Thank you.
mean, that's a problem.
Relationships, certain kind of relationships with employers. Then that's different because, especially what I think an employer that understands the benefit to their in terms of having this relationship. For me, this chasm that still exists between education and work. Community colleges are best situated to be able to make some serious change in the area. That's what I always believe. A lot I actually retired a couple years ago.
I
That's
know.
why you
I'm
haven't
like,
seen me.
I know. I was like, wait a minute.
And I was dean of a media campus, and we couldn't use the technology and anything else. So I decided it's time. Yeah, but I haven't gotten away from the college. Still on all my emails, I go to a lot of stuff about it. So maybe even some consulting, we're in conversation about it now. But one of the things that I did not hear you say anything about was apprenticeships.
It's interesting. My kids were like, "Here, she's out placement," and it was what was available was like apprenticeships. I just agree with all of your work-based learning. But we are for apprenticeship.
In terms of that chasm there, for me, that's, in the state and federal government also. In terms of the money that's available as far as apprenticeships are concerned. I developed a program 11 years ago called Diploma Pathway. We were approached by an industry trade organization that wanted to increase diversity in that sector of writer, producer, editors. And as far as their workforce is concerned. Before I got into education, I worked in television for 20 years.
That's it. That's how.
So, along with this trade organization, we developed a program called the Diploma Pathway. It's in its 11th year now because it's been so successful for trainees who's become writer, producer, editors. So, their schoolwork is work. There's not this, because they actually do projects and work on projects and learn how to write, create, and produce, all these things. And I think there's such an opportunity with apprenticeships. The same thing, because they're unlike internships. There's still, but there's a lot of skin in the game. There's apprenticeships where they're paid, and they didn't pay for it. And I'd like to understand why. It has, and I was on a nationwide Zoom thing about apprenticeships, and it was funny because the person said, one of the people leading it said, one of the most difficult organizations to work with are community colleges.
Wow, really?
Yes, he said because they are so well placed, to do well in this area, but arcane regulations and how they work, just makes it so difficult to work.
Really? Wow.
It makes it so difficult.
We want to do an apprentice. We really want to. They want to do some apprenticeships, but I kind of feel like that. It seems like there's just a lot of red tape. There's a lot of things that kind of and then we have to wait for. It takes a long.
Yeah, on the school side.
It just takes a long.
Some lawyers are just like, we could do this.
Yeah, we can find somebody else.
And the growing people. They develop it themselves. It's open to anyone. And now they've partnered with a few colleges that work hard, like University of Michigan. And it's kind of when I saw that, at first I was like, oh, whatever, Google. But then I saw that there's a college credit.
This yours? Okay, you can leave it here. So 10 a.m. break, 10:23 introduction, and then 11. Yeah, so about 11, but 10:28 or 10:29. Here's the run of show.
Okay, that's fine. That way I can just make sure.
Is this? No, this is not yours. This one's not yours. Yes. Right through there, and then the door's bigger. Oh, I feel like that's weird. Oh. Well, welcome back, everyone. We're excited to have with us here today a strong lineup of panelists to help us further dig deep into our discussion areas. And we're really thankful to be joined by Jessica Koo Kim, who will be serving as our panel discussion moderator. Jessica Koo Kim is the Chief Deputy of the newly formed Los Angeles County Department of Economic Opportunity. Jessica has worked in economic and workforce development within LA County since 2005 and brings local community knowledge and trust, field expertise, subject matter expertise, organizational and sector leadership, and demonstrated outcomes for economic and workforce development programs and services, public-private partnerships, and collaborative systems change. As Chief Deputy of LA County's Department of Economic Opportunity, Jessica oversees the operations of DEO to ensure enhanced economic and workforce development policy, programs, and services, commissions, administration, public affairs and communications, and information technology and data management and analytics that serve to create quality jobs, help small businesses and high-road employers start and grow, and build vibrant local communities and spaces. Previously, Jessica had served as the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation's Vice President of Economic and Workforce Development, where she had oversight of worker and small business-focused programs and services, strategic engagement with the public, private, social, and philanthropic sectors, and increasing regional resources, opportunities, and alignment. Let's bring her to the podium now to begin our panel discussion. Please help me in welcoming Jessica Koo Kim.
Thank you, Leslie. It's a
whenever your bio's read, it always makes me tingle a little. But hopefully you all are having a wonderful morning. I'm really glad to be back to this Future of Work Forum. I was here for the inaugural one, and it's such a great opportunity for us to come together and discuss it. And my colleague, Dr. Sujin Jez, hopefully you enjoyed her presentation this morning as well. Let's begin with our panelists. So if you could please share your name, title, organization, and your reason for participating today, and I'll start here to my left.
Hello, everyone. My name is Will Walls, and I help small business owners and entrepreneurs get more through the language of sales. I am also an alumni. I started at 2020, non-traditional student at PCC in February of 2020, right before the pandemic happened. I had no idea. Decided to go back to school, and then there was a pandemic. So it was quite an interesting thing. I started February 18th, graduated this past year. I'm now at UCR, and on the panel, I'm the student representative to share my perspective.
Thank you.
And good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Micah Young. I serve as the Dean of Health Sciences here at Pasadena City College. My reason for being on the panel is to represent both the academic community, but also represent the interests of students as they're looking toward those pathways and those true career pathways and alignment from education to industry and beyond.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Lobianco. I'm the director of the LA County Department of Economic Opportunity. I work closely with Jessica. We are one of the newest departments in the county bridging economic and workforce development. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today to talk about how we can bring together our public workforce and education systems for shared impact. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Sandra Sanchez. I'm the interim vice chancellor for the Workforce and Economic Development Division of the California Community College's Chancellor's Office. It's a really long title. So I'm excited to be here this morning. Part of the responsibility of the system office is to make sure that our colleges have the resources to meet our students where they're at and to support them along their career journeys. So I'm really excited to be here today to kind of share with you a little bit about what our system office is focused on and how we're moving this work forward. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Martin Hernandez. I'm the Senior Program Associate with the LA County Department of Arts and Culture. So excited for all the county representation on the panel today. Big thank you to PCC for having me. I'm here. I actually administrate the LA County Arts Internship Program on behalf of the department. It's alongside the Getty's Foundation. It's the largest paid arts internship program in the country. PCC is a very strong partner of ours and has worked closely with us to ensure that their students have access to the program over the past couple of years. We as a department have been embarking on a multi-year effort to build deeper relationships with the community colleges to facilitate more students from the community colleges participating in the program, and so I'm here to share a little bit about that today.
Thank you. So, Will, let's begin with you, and congratulations for graduating and moving on to UCR, another great university nearby. So, as a PCC graduate and as someone who worked in the Freeman Career Center here on campus, what factors do you think hinder a student's ability to achieve their career objectives?
Well, I want to start with, I loved the video that we started out with when they were asking the kids about, what are they here for, that type of thing. That was good. I think if you were to ask the next question, like, do you have an ed plan? Have you met with a counselor? Have you met with an advisor? Have you been to the transfer center? You would probably find that I just have a feeling that they might not have done any of that. So as a student that worked in the transfer center, I was actually surprised at how many students didn't have an ed plan or had never met with a counselor or an advisor or never been to the transfer center. The transfer center, oh my God, I cannot stress how important the transfer from day one, the transfer center, you need to know the game plan. When I went in there to the transfer center my first week, I had no clue. I'm a non-traditional student. I don't know what. I went in there and I said, look, I don't know what I don't know. They grab my transcripts. I did have my transcripts, and they start reading them like ones and zeros from the Matrix, and they start telling me what to do. So I think, what was the question again?
What factors do you think hinder a student's ability to achieve their career objectives?
I think it's going to land on goal setting. And when I say goal setting, what I mean is having a dream. When you show up here to PCC, I think that you need to know what your dream is, because if you can have a dream, you can have a goal. And if you have a goal, an advisor can help you, a counselor can help you. So I kind of think that the customer, which is the student, I think PCC should be in the business of selling dreams, you know? Because if they never make that connection, going to school, and when you have an issue, like if they accidentally sign you up as out of state, that's a problem that you're gonna have to advocate for yourself to get them to fix it, because sometimes people don't fix it right away and you've got issues. So advocating for yourself, having a dream, having a goal. Did I answer the question? I think
You did. You did, and I love the point you made about you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes, that's so important. I said that so many times whenever I met with anybody. Look, I don't know what I don't know, but here I am. And whenever I would say that, they would come up with all this, oh, well, did you know you can do this? Oh, did you know you can do that? No, I don't know what I don't know. I tell people, I have a friend of mine whose daughter's 19 years old. She just started at PCC, and I told her to go into the transfer center and say, Will Walls told me to come here, and he said, I can say, I don't know what I don't know. It's just, it works. People are gonna help you.
I like that, and I think the institutions, as we think through it, how do we empower our students to know it all, right? And how are we delivering that capability for that student to know it, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They're not gonna know. They're not experts, and you know, one of the things being in the Career Center, some of the students that come in, and you can tell, I mean, they're trying to get up the nerve to, you know, talk to adults and say, hey, this isn't right, or what do I, you know, I watched this happen, you know, and so they don't know what they don't know. They're not experts, and, you know, it's up to us to help them.
Thank you. So, Dr. Young, you know, we're talking about transfers, and one of the important things is that we have curriculum that is aligned to what industry needs, that it's aligned to the skills demand of employers. What do you think are effective strategies for education to do that?
So when we're talking about alignment between industry and academics, I would say you have to look at the competencies that are required in both in terms of having effective educators, and I think the California Community Colleges does a great job of procuring highly effective educators. But then it's a competency-based curriculum that leads to employment opportunities, and making sure that our faculty and our staff are all committed to that same goal of understanding how do the building blocks in the classroom lead to employment opportunities on the back end. Sometimes that means retooling on both ends, retooling both the student as well as the faculty to understand that the industry has changed, and industry will continuously change as the economies of scale change, and as we move from regional economies to global economies, and understanding that we're in Southern California, which is a large global market. We have to be positioned to not only prepare workforce for the local California economy, but for that global economy, which the Southern California region also provides as well. So that alignment has to be not just at the K through 12 cycle, but also at the community college cycle and then beyond, making sure that there's a value for education. I know we all say we value education, but getting that true value for education across the penumbra of institutions that exist. We have a lot of students who have to work during the time that they're in college in terms of work-based education and work-based knowledge base, and things that we're supporting, but how do we build on that capacity for students so that they can migrate into a starting career and additional careers, understanding modern work says that the average person will probably change careers 5 to 7 times within the course of their lifetime. How do we create capacity within the individual and the autonomy and the advocacy and that intentionality behind the student to be able to say, hey, I need help, I don't know what I don't know, but I want to come here to get my start, and how does this position me long-term for success with industry?
Appreciate that. You know, and building on that, Sandra, we know that the future of work, like Dr. Young mentioned, many of us, you know, people are going to change careers multiple times, but we know that first career is essential to catapulting your career when we talk about earnings and wages. What transformation needs to take place today to address that reality, and how do we center that transformation around a student-centered design?
Thank you for that question. I think that, well, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the Vision for Success. And I think at the Chancellor's Office, we are doubling down our efforts on the Vision for Success. The governor's roadmap very much aligns with our Vision for Success. He very much believes that the work that we have started needs to continue. And so part of this transformation is really putting an emphasis on how our colleges are creating empowered learners and creating unconditional belonging on our campuses. And I think one of the key things is, how do we facilitate career mobility for our students? How are colleges implementing these transformations to ensure that our students do have access to every possible opportunity or work-based learning experience that's going to help them land that first job that will then catapult them to greater opportunities. So in terms of the work that we've been doing is really helping the colleges to transform their institutions, to think about how they serve students and walk alongside them as they are coming to access resources and services. And if we know that an individual is going to have about 17 jobs throughout their lifetime in 5 different industries, then the old paradigm of creating an expert and sending them off to work and that they'll retire in that old economy model no longer stands true. And so we need to change the way we meet students. We help them and we walk alongside them on their journey. One of the things that we recently did at the Chancellor's Office is we commissioned a landscape analysis to look at nationally what is happening with experiential learning and work-based learning across the country. And what we learned from that landscape analysis, and the report will be published in the spring, is that the first job has an impact on their lifetime of earnings for an individual. So that really makes it super important for our colleges to make sure that work-based learning, experiential learning, jobs and internships are a key component of every pathway that a student enters and participates in, if we're going to help catapult them, as you stated, to that next opportunity for success. And so it's really important that we double down on our vision for success. Part of that is, of course, owning our data and looking at how our students are actually doing. Are they thriving? Is it disproportionately impacting certain populations of students? How we address that matters. And so I think if we center our students in that design, if we focus on meeting them where they're at, pairing high expectations with high support, we can hope to have better outcomes for our students. But I think integrating that conversation with our faculty and making sure that they understand that students will not have one job in their lifetime. How do we prepare them with those competencies, as was stated earlier, and the skills that they need to manage and thrive in multiple industries?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I often joke with my husband. He was a teacher, and then he worked at an IT company, and then he went into occupational therapy, and then now he's in sales. And so it definitely moves around, right? You don't stay in one career path and one occupation. But we did pay for all that education. So that's the joke. So Martin, let me move this to you. So you are working with all of the community colleges to foster work-based learning, especially in the arts. Can you describe your experience fostering work-based learning in partnership with our community colleges?
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate Dr. Jez opening up our conversation, talking about values and encouraging us all to think about our values and the approach to the work. You know, I exist in this kind of interesting space in that our internship program, we do not do the placements. So all of the arts nonprofits that are part of our organization, or part of our program that receive a grant from us, actually go and do their own hiring. So I kind of just go out and cheerlead for the program at large in front of students and say, hey, in the springtime every year, we have about 230 of these 400-hour paid internships in the arts. Please apply. And so when I joined the department in 2018, specifically to increase our outreach in the community colleges, one of the things that I actually had been in alignment with my previous work, but in this new role is, I think every college has its own set of values, and sometimes those things are very apparent, and sometimes they're not. And I think what happens, unfortunately, when I'm coming into a college that has a lot going on, whether it's a community college or otherwise, when those values are kind of put off to the side, it makes it more difficult for me to understand who are the key players, who are the people that I should be talking to, who is best poised to do the warm handoff to their students or other faculty so that we can, increase enrollment participation in our community college students into the program. And so here at PCC, it was actually a music faculty that we had a connection with that introduced me to folks at the Freeman Center and said, hey, actually, this music faculty had been advocating for our program for many years before our department had the infrastructure to support with that. And that was a really vital connection. And I, then was able to be put in contact with, I think back that time, I think it was just Leslie who was on the team at that time a couple of years ago. But, from there, we grew a really strong formal partnership where now I'm able to come onto the campus every year and speak about the program and share this opportunity with the students. And I don't have to restart the process of meeting folks all over again to figure out who's going to help me book the classroom to be able to come and speak and be in front of the students. And I will just say, for our department, I know, both because of my previous work, I worked in workforce development programs both at the city youth source centers, WIOA programs before I came to the county, so I kind of know how the ball moves. And I know that sometimes for the career folks, the goal is get the students the jobs. I know that sometimes for the teaching faculty and the professors, it's get the students into the classroom and passing the class. And if you're not careful and if the values are not in alignment, then those things can actually be opposed to each other, right? And one of the things that we're seeing a lot in our program in the era of COVID is that if you make a student choose between their internship or their schooling, they're gonna choose their schooling over their internship 9 times out of 10. And so I work really hard to make sure that this program, that students are aware that this program is very flexible. We actually do not require students to major in the arts to participate in this program. We know there's a lot of arts-specific misconceptions and anxieties for students that may want to participate in this program but feel like they can't or what have you. And so it's really, really helpful when again, those values are present enough that we can have that conversation at the outset. We have 228 of these opportunities every single year, as far north as Palmdale, Lancaster, south to Long Beach, west to Santa Monica, and east to Pomona. And so we just want your students to be able to participate. So when the staff are all on the same page, both in the Career Center as well as in the classroom, that can be a wonderful starting place for us. And when we're not there, it obviously takes, a lot more work in navigation.
I really appreciate your point about the values alignment and having those conversations. I think that's a key to get people to row in the same direction. Kelly, so our newly formed department has a mission to help unlock LA County's economic potential by connecting workers to quality jobs, streamlining resources to businesses, and building vibrant, diverse communities. What does that look like in practicality, and how do you tie into the work of the region's community colleges?
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, and before I even dig into a little bit of our department, I want to piggyback on my colleague from the arts department's commentary about this sort of shared vision of success, because I really appreciate that too. There's amazing partnerships through the arts department for these great creative career pathways. And I think we all can do at the county a better job of connecting to our community college systems about the sort of world of work-based learning opportunities that we have available to us, through our department, and I'll get into in a second a few of the other ways that we can better align. We oversee the Youth at Work program, which supports 14 to 24-year-olds in getting paid work-based learning experiences. And We work with about 10,000 young adults per year, and sometimes the goal is supporting educational attainment. Sometimes the goal is really connecting to that first job that's not, that's unsubsidized and not paid by the county. And through the American Rescue Plan, we've been able to enhance our programming for a little under 1,000 folks in the next couple of years for a much longer internship experience. So, there's a lot of opportunities to connect to the arts, to connect to a variety of sectors, and even connect to county jobs. We're a huge workforce ourselves, 110,000 employees and counting, I think, in almost every occupation you can think of. And so a lot of what we're trying to do with our work-based learning experiences through our public workforce system is also create a pathway to county jobs, which are really great with good benefits and offer lifelong pathways for folks. But to take a step back, our department is brand new. I've talked to some of you, I see some friendly faces in the room, about what we're trying to do here. We launched July 1 and are so lucky to have Jessica have joined our team recently as well. We're bridging economic and workforce development for the first time for the county under one roof. We are, at the beginning of this, in Jessica's bio, you heard our mission. We are, in our mission and our vision, we're really here to build a more equitable economy with thriving local communities, inclusive and sustainable growth, and opportunity and mobility for all. And how do we do that? We do that through creating jobs, through supporting small businesses and high-road employers, and building vibrant communities and local spaces. And then what does that work really mean? So we oversee one of the LA County Workforce Development Boards. That means that we oversee 58 of the 88 cities and the unincorporated areas, and we work really closely with our other 6 workforce development boards, making sure that we're supporting workers and businesses in all 4,000 square miles of LA County. We run 19 of the American Job Centers of California, again in partnership with over 40 with our collective workforce development boards. We oversee, and in that work, it's outreach to communities. We're offering job readiness training, industry-informed occupational skills training and credentials, oftentimes in partnership with community colleges. We're working with businesses, making sure there's incentives for them for hiring and training and bringing on new talent, and we're supporting that sort of job connection and offering follow-up services for retention and advancement for workers throughout LA County. And then on the flip side, sort of as we're thinking about that connection to economic development, we offer a lot of support for businesses directly outside of hiring and training, but also that. So we run the Office of Small Business. And this is really a concierge for small businesses and entrepreneurs to get education, technical assistance, capital access, networking opportunities. We support the connection to our preference programs and certifications so that small businesses and community-based organizations can access the $6 billion of county purchasing power every single year. And we're also doing things like bringing together industry clusters, making sure that we're thinking about our high growth industries here in LA County. We're supporting business attraction, business improvement, and really literally looking at county space as opportunities for economic development in areas that we can build, more affordable housing and commercial opportunity. So we're doing a lot, but really at the end of the day, we're focused on, workers and businesses, and all of that through an equity lens to bring it back to our mission and vision. We have a lot of resources, but they're still limited, and so we want to make sure all of the investments that we make are for those historically disinvested communities. So we're working with workers who need our resources the most, and we're working in sectors that have the highest opportunity to get folks family-sustaining wages and pathways for that mobility that we just talked about. And so, we're really excited to be this new department and work more closely with the community colleges. And so the teams that sort of compile this department, we're about 200 strong, have been working closely with the community colleges for a long time. We co-locate centers. We have a lot of training programs that we offer together, whether it's for the green economy or for county positions or beyond. And we do that because we know that the folks that are in community college classrooms or walking into our public workforce system or entrepreneurs sitting in our Office of Small Businesses are all the same folks and with same families and same needs. And so there's a real mutual advantage for us to align our efforts together. And we know that's difficult sometimes because we're like two large bureaucracies trying to move together in sync. And so some of the things, on my mind as we're a new department and refreshing our relationship with community colleges and how we can work better together is really this thinking about, I think, Will, you used the word customers, like if our students are customers or our participants in any of our workforce programs, what is their experience in accessing the public workforce system or our economic development systems or our public education systems, and how can we come together to map that experience for them so that they get, I like to use the term sort of overwhelmed with the support that they actually need to be present in classrooms, achieve their educational credentials and degrees, and get that job that really helps sustain their families. I think a lot about industry engagement. We talked about like how do you make sure you're aligning the work in the classroom to the evolving needs of our external environment. We're all out there talking to businesses, whether it's major industries, small businesses, nonprofits, hiring managers. And so what can we do as two large systems, our county and our community colleges, to think about industry engagement and make sure all of the work that we're doing is industry informed? And to the presentation before mine by the California Competes folks, not competing against each other, but actually thinking about, how are we serving the individuals the best way that we can, but also thinking with a systems change lens. I think there's opportunities for us all to, think about how to connect students to other services of the county. We're one access point focused on economic and workforce development, but we know that folks there's an opportunity cost to upskilling and gaining an education. So how do we make sure that where there are resources for wraparound support, cash assistance, there's a lot that the county can offer, that we're braiding that together. And DEO, our new Department of Economic Opportunity, really hoping to be a point of access for community colleges to make the county make a little bit more sense. And then lastly, I think that there's opportunities for us, like I said at the very top of this, around shared impact. So we have an opportunity to set strategic goals together, to look at the region and think about the macro level change that we really want to see and set those goals. And so that when we're doing the hard work of moving a community college system or moving the county, that we have shared goals in mind and that we're working in concert on those. And so I'll go ahead and stop there.
Thank you. A lot to think about, especially from this morning's presentation too. Kelly mentioned centering those in disadvantaged communities. This morning's presentation shared some unfortunate data regarding significant decline in enrollment across California community colleges. And the additional painful reality is that students of color, that is African American and Latino students, are disproportionately impacted. And so I pose this to all of the panelists, and I'm hoping, Will, I could start with you to start with the student perspective. What action should we be taking to improve enrollment?
I think of a story of a gentleman that I met I met his mom at my other office, and she was telling me about her son who wanted to go to UCLA, but he wasn't in school right now because he, I guess he ran into some issues or whatever, so now he's just working a job, but he's not in school, but he wanted to go to UCLA. So I think it really gets back to that. Ask me the question one more time, I'm sorry.
What action should we be taking to improve enrollment? And I would say specifically, for students of color who've been disproportionately impacted.
So when I think about this one kid, when he ran into the issue of them, the school saying, oh, you're out of state, that whole thing, it was going to cost him $900 he didn't have. So he was just not in school and just going to go on with life. That's not okay. That's absolutely not okay. I told his mom, meet me at the Career Center, bring him with you. And, you know, I followed up. I walked him over to the transfer center, and we solved his problem. And that kid was in school. He was back enrolled. So this is a customer who had went away because he ran into some issue. This is an African-American customer who had went away, but we got it resolved. And I think one of the things that I think would be really good here at PCC is if someone is enrolled in school and now all of a sudden they're not. Who cares? Does anybody care? I mean, so what I'm saying is that what if there was a department that all they did was customer service, was like, hey, we noticed that you're not in school. How's it going? What's up? You know, if somebody was to call, just simply call to find out what the issue is. Why are you not enrolled? Where did you go? That in sales, we call that low-hanging fruit. That's a customer that will become a customer again just because somebody called. So I don't know if PCC has a customer service department. I don't know. I have no idea. But if they did, you know, it would be, I think it would make an impact if there was someone that followed up. Just, you know, and really what's interesting is that you don't have to be in customer service to follow up. If someone came to your department and asked for help for something or whatever, what would be the problem with somebody just following up to find out, did that student get what they needed? Did you get help? Was it resolved? I don't think that happens anywhere in any departments. I don't think it does. But I'm saying it would have an impact towards bringing those, I'm going to call them customers, I'm calling students customers, bringing those customers back. Just simple follow-up. Follow-up would be, I don't think it would even, what would be the cost to that, you know? It's not, you know, simple, hey, where are you? What happened? What's going on? How can we help? So, I don't know.
I like it. I think that's a great idea. And there's data you bring up. There's a report that was commissioned by our region's community colleges here called Community Colleges at a Crossroads. And in that, one of the best practices that was pointed out was to take a look at these data points. Like when a student doesn't purchase a book, can someone follow up with them? Because by a certain week, that means they're going to drop it or something's not going right. Could we use that data to then follow up with the student? And colleges that have implemented that have seen better student retention. And so there are opportunities like that. And so I appreciate what you're saying, and thank you for sharing that. Sure. Panelists, anyone else?
I'll add something. So I think, you know, one of the things, or a few of the things that our colleges need to focus on in terms of how we serve our students better is really around the idea of retaining the existing students that we have. So we have really high attrition rates across our system for students who start with us one semester and then never come back. So I think in business, you say it's easier to keep a customer than to get a new customer. So part of that, I believe, is how do we become institutions that create environments where students feel like they belong unconditionally. And so what are the institutional barriers that we have created for our students to protect our institutions that are not welcoming to our students? And so I think that to your point of customer service, when we shift the burden away from the student, then we make our institutions more accessible to them, where we don't burden them with proving that they are in fact poor to access resources, when we don't burden them with having to buy textbooks for specific classes, when we look at initiatives that are intended to support them unconditionally as they're in their educational journey. Those are the types of things that will help us keep our students. We know that there is an overall demographic decline in babies. Nobody had babies 20 years ago, and it doesn't look like for the next 10 or 20 years there will be babies that are coming of age to enroll into our institutions. So it becomes even more important that we really think about how we are welcoming to students of all walks of life. And so adult learners, for example, how do we facilitate them accessing resources? What are the barriers that we've created to keep them from accessing resources? And so those are some of the things that I know at the system office we're focused on. I know I hear a lot about like, oh, we have to do paper applications for adult learners, and then CCC Apply is terrible, and all the things, right? And so those are some of the initiatives that we are working on at the system office to make sure that that is not the reason why our students can't access access our institutions, but also access the resources. And I think that rather than having a customer service department, we should be focused on everyone being a customer service provider for anyone who walks on their campus. And that's not just the admissions and records staff, it's not just the counselors, it's your janitors, it's all the facilities folks, because oftentimes the first interaction that a student has in the parking lot is with the parking attendant. It has nothing to do with counseling, has nothing to do with admissions. So everyone on the campus needs to be focused on making sure that our students feel welcomed, feel accepted, and that someone is going to help them regardless of what position they're in. And I know, having worked at a campus, at 3 campuses, I know how hard that can be, but I think that we're at a point in time where if we are not intentional about shifting how we serve students, we are going to continue to see a decline, because in the past we could say, well, we're just gonna get all the new graduates, right? So we lose students, the new graduates will come and fill. That's not gonna happen anymore. There is a complete demographic decline on the number of students that are going into the K-12 system. So we can't expect to replace them from that. So we need to make sure that our systems welcome students wherever they come to us, especially adult learners, and especially focus on the retention of the students we already have, because that's what's gonna make us, one, sustain our enrollments, but also help us achieve greater success for the communities that we serve.
I'd like to add, we also have to make a value proposition to our students. What is the value added to going to a California community college? I think oftentimes that's overlooked in terms of the value proposition on the front end as well as on the back end. Because if you save a student indebtedness, they're able to take a job at a lower reimbursement level, right? And you don't have as much turnover in employment where folks are job hopping to find the highest salary, because now they can take a job and stay in that job and grow with that job because they're financially stable. Also, when we're talking about disproportionately impacted communities, we have to look at what are our approaches to making sure that when we talk about disproportionately impacted communities, we also have to look at what are the barriers that they face outside of the educational arena, right? So most of our educational institutions are built for middle income, upper middle income individuals, 9 to 5 scheduled, traditional college schedules. Most of those students may be working if we know the traditional, we have to look holistically at our student populations. Are our classes available when they need classes? Are we intentionally making the value proposition of higher education to the students? What are we doing to make sure that the classes are accessible and have pathways that lead to not only life-sustaining wages, then family-sustaining wages? Because if we want to retain that population and want them to reinvest in our system in terms of sending future generations of students into our system, whether it's California community colleges or any other public institutions, I think that's important. The last thing I'll say is that we have to make the value proposition because we have competition, right? Absolutely. For those very populations that we historically have always been there, that we somewhat and sometimes historically have ignored, now they have options. And if those options are making the value proposition to those students, but not showing them the price tag, but the value proposition is being there, those students will make the best decision that's in front of them. So we have to look at holistically at our students in terms of retaining, yes, reaching out, following up, the cold calls, et cetera, but we also have to make that general value proposition to why the California Community College is the best bang for your buck, regardless of your background. And then we have to understand who our students are, right? When I ask people, who is a California Community College student? And I tell people, it's everybody. It's those students that are at the UCs who need an extra class. It's the students at the Cal States who are taking classes because their system is just as impacted as ours, but ours is more accessible than theirs. I would always say that we should do a study on the number of degrees we actually save from the Cal State system. Right? We really should, because they're taking classes with us because they can't get them at their home institutions. So we're adding to the baccalaureate level education for preparation for students along the continuum, which also leads them to transfer to graduate schools and go beyond. So we really need to look at our customers and make that value proposition to all the communities that we serve, that the California community colleges are uniquely equipped to serve all students without barriers.
I'll just add quickly too, because that's a great point, Dr. Young, that, I think that there's an opportunity as well for us to better connect the county systems. Like we have clients and customers that come to the county for a variety of goods and services and programs and whatnot, and making sure that we're both sharing the value proposition that you're speaking of as well, not just sort of having the systems butt up against each other, but also mutually reinforcing that sort of that continued follow-up, that sort of like retention support and that sort of advancement support as well. That like how do we bridge that so it's not just sort of the full staff of the colleges, which I think is a good point, but also the folks that are following up with individuals who graduate in that first job, telling them about how that additional degree or additional credential can help them on that mobility pathway. So I just think it's really important for that sort of mutually shared goal to be set among us.
Just briefly, for me in my position, I think the community colleges are in this really unique space of being able to keep a really wide definition of success, right? Degree attainment is certainly one type of success, but I don't think that it's necessarily the type of success for all students. And specifically with the internship program, as I mentioned earlier, like we don't require students to be majoring in the arts to participate. That was actually a change implemented many years ago out of many students at the colleges saying, I would love to participate in this program. I literally can't major in the arts because my parents won't allow me to, or they won't financially support me in majoring in the arts. So it's a passion of mine. I'm taking classes where I can in the arts, but I'm majoring in computer science because that's what I need to do to pay the bills, or that's what my family or generationally I'm being told is what I need to do in order to make the next jump in my career. So what is it to say to a student like, come take art classes just for the sake of taking art classes if you're able to, right? Like what is it to say that you're going to school for the sake of learning what it is that you want to do? I think I'm guilty of this as well in that, we have this very, it's an expansive definition of the arts, but it's an arts program, right? That's really what we're here to kind of connect folks into. But even within that, there's a huge variety of experiences. I think about how arts faculty on community college campuses are huge undertapped resources in like, how did you get to become a professor of theater or a professor of music? Like, what does your career look like? What are you doing outside of this institution to feed that creative part of your spirit? What would it mean for a student to be able to major in computer science, but also have a career in the arts as a musician or a performer or a dancer, so on and so forth? So like, how are we keeping our definitions of success expansive enough to be able to, kind of cast a wider net? And even within the field of arts and culture, in LA County, it's estimated that 400,000 people work in the creative sector in LA County alone, but an additional 150,000 of them are more independent contractors, entrepreneurs, artists, performers that don't necessarily have a 9-to-5 in the arts, but they are contributing to the economy, number one, and number two, they have livelihoods that just look a little different, right, than working for the county or working for a major financial institution. So again, I think for me, the magic of community colleges can really be that, once they know what they know, or once they get to know what they know, isn't it an opportunity for them to kind of build something that looks a little bit different than just, I'm going for my AA or my bachelor's or my master's, and how can the community college institution support them in that? I think is really exciting and a unique position.
Let's continue with that direction, Martin. So we were talking about barriers to enrollment, and now let's talk about, the system changes that we need to strengthen our system alignment to the future of work. What are some of the system changes that we need that you all would recommend? Yeah.
So, my program looks completely different than it did before the pandemic. My job description, everything that I'm doing on the day-to-day has completely changed. I cannot overstate that enough. I think the county gets a rep of being a little bit slow to move sometimes, and certainly there are bureaucratic levers sometimes that need to get pushed and pulled in order to make things happen. But what I can say as a county employee in the heat of the pandemic, for specifically our department, we were running around like chickens with our heads cut off to meet this moment and to be able to actually move forward some things that we had wanted to do for a really long time that were not possible in the pre-COVID world. I'm gonna just give a really specific example for remote work within our internship program. So before the pandemic, our internship program was summer only. Interns would start in June and in August. They would work 40 hours a week full time. We did let them drop down to 30 occasionally. And there was no allowance for remote work whatsoever. So the expectation was that the intern would be on site either at the nonprofit organization or in the home office, and we had no exceptions to that. The program that I administrate now is a 9-month program with internships starting in June that can go all the way till March of the following calendar year. And we allow for all different kinds of remote experiences. So some interns are working fully remote, some interns are not working remote at all, some are doing a hybrid. So I think, as maybe low-hanging obvious as it is, I don't know that we should be doing anything the same that we were before the pandemic. And when it comes to work, I have interns asking me, well, Martin, is this a hybrid position? Are these remote positions? Are these in-person positions? Language, I was not even thinking about 3 years ago, right? As I'm sure many of us are. I imagine, with instruction, it's similar, right? So I think leaning into those questions, even if we don't necessarily have the answers, we poll both our supervisors and our interns every single year about, especially since the pandemic, about how the structure of the program is working for them. And we ask both our supervisors and our interns in the post-pandemic world, is the remote work working for you? Are you enjoying it? Do you feel like it's compromising the quality of your internship? And we're being told, no, actually the flexibility I appreciate. I appreciate being able to talk to my supervisor and say, hey, my kid is sick at home. Can I, just jump on my laptop and work here, right? So this is a moment for us to kind of stop, pause, reevaluate what has been working. For us, it was, we had these ideas on the back burner, like making the program more year-round, that were not necessarily feasible before the pandemic. And we saw that as an opportunity to say, hey, we know that a 40-hour-a-week internship in the summer from June through August only serves one type of student. A student who is not working another job during the summer, a student who has the summer off, which is not always a thing, of course. And so how can we build a better program that's more expansive to a wider range of students? So I think it's daunting, and we're trying a lot of things, and I'm looking at the data rolling in and hoping that everything comes up roses, and so far it has. But we have to be constantly, willing to rethink these things. This is a legacy program of our department. It's been around for 22 years, and I'm the first person to have said, hey, can we make this a year-round program now because of the pandemic? And we were able to do that, and it's been really successful. So again, how are we taking this moment to kind of challenge and change some of those things that before didn't feel broke, so didn't get fixed?
Sandra, you got to have some thoughts on this.
I do. I think that during the pandemic, to your point, our system demonstrated that it can change. In a matter of weeks, the entire 116 colleges went fully online. So in terms of what are the changes that we can make, I think that we have proven to ourselves that we are able to make changes. I think to support kind of the idea of shifting our own workforce, though, we are making a lot of investments in professional development for our staff and our faculty to make sure that we can fully adapt to the new world of work. But also, things like trying to figure out the funding formula for competency-based education. We changed regulations. Part of that is understanding, how could we do it differently? If we focus on competencies, then we're no longer, worried about how much time a student spends in a classroom. We're very focused on the competencies that they are learning as they progress across their journey, but also then meeting them where they're at. If they have to work full-time, how they access our instructional programs from a competency perspective really gives them much more flexibility to ensure that they can complete a program on their time frame based on whatever their life circumstances. The other thing that we've recently done is, I will say that in the last 3 years, we've updated or changed, passed 22 new regulations for the system. And a lot of it is around what we learned through the pandemic, where we had old regulations that were really outdated and didn't support colleges in their ability to adapt. So recently, though, we also passed, the Board of Governors approved the work experience regulations, and it used to be called cooperative work experience. It was heavily focused on burdening the student with finding a job and then having to figure out how to manage that system. So part of the update, one, is that regulation was 50 years old. Didn't even get updated when economic and workforce development became the third primary mission of the colleges. It's continued to stay in its old form. So we updated the regulation to really shift the burden from the students to the institutions and to be more collaborative with employers in ensuring that our institutions are better able to partner, but also created the flexibility that allows our faculty to think about how they would embed experiential learning and work-based learning opportunities in their curriculum in a more intentional way. Also, one of the updates is making sure that when you create those opportunities, we are intentional in designing those to fit the pathway that a student has chosen. And how do we support that? What it's going to require is that our colleges and our system as a whole rethink how we support students in that endeavor, how we support, to your point earlier about, is it like you have to know the faculty member in the music department, or is there a career and job placement center that any employer can go to, or does it look different on your campus? Whatever it is, the intent of updating those regulations is to make sure that our colleges have the flexibility to do whatever it's going to take at a local level to ensure that they are able to meet students where they're at, but also to shift that burden from the student to the institution and to the partners that they're working with, because as was stated also earlier, students don't know what they don't know. And so since we know better, we should do better. So
appreciate that. I'm gonna, as I go into the last question for the panel, I just wanna let the audience know we'll have a Q&A after this. So if anyone has a question, please feel free to come make your way down to the mic, or if you got a loud voice, I could probably hear you. And so if we could do this rapid fire, Bishop Desmond Tutu wisely advised that we eat an elephant one bite at a time. What is the big bite that the Los Angeles region should be taking together? I'm gonna put Kelly on the spot.
Okay. Sure. Let's see. The big bite that we should be taking together. I really appreciate the point you just made around shifting the burden from the student or our customer to the institutions, right? We can take on some of that burden and make it a little bit easier for folks to get what they need out of our collective institutions. And so I would say, I think the big bite we need to make is really setting some ambitious goals together about the kind of impact that we want to have on the region. Whether it's like we want to dramatically increase, our graduation rates, and in that we take the opportunity cost, away from students in joining and completing programs, or, rapidly reducing the poverty rate. Like I think that there's an opportunity for us as large systems to come together and speak our future into existence, and we have a lot of the sort of like power and resources and minds with us to be able to do that.
Anybody else?
I'm going to jump in here, and I'm going to say that I think that the success story needs to be elaborated on. I mean, I'm here because my mentor, in February of 2020, I was on the phone, and I remember this person was unemployed, not in school, not doing stuff in the past. But this person, I remember this person saying, PCC changed my life, bro. And I watched it happen. I literally watched this person's life become way better. And today, this person is a professor here at PCC. I watched that happen. And that had a whole lot to do with what made me want to enroll, because PCC changed somebody's life. And I was like, I want PCC to change my life. So, you know, there has to be more success stories told as to what it did for this person, what it did for that person. We have a lot of the data, and it's good, it's important. We should have the data to find out where we are. But what about those success stories as to, in terms of, how it helped this person? You know, from a customer's perspective, you know, you got to tell the success stories. So I think there should be more success stories told.
I would just add, I mean, it's been mentioned several times, but, you know, for me, breaking down silos, I have a picture of like two people on the opposite sides of a wall, like knocking it down. And I actually think that breaking down silos is like swapping sides, or like, you know, stepping into each other's shoes to really understand this person that you're trying to build a partnership with. Like, what is their day-to-day look like? And how can I use that information to inform the ways that I am, you know, stepping into this partnership? I think that I would like to say that, you know, because of my experience working directly with students and on the community college campuses before my role, before my current role, when I approach a community college in my current role, I'm like, I will bring my own flyers, I will make the QR code, I will, you know, pick the date and time, you just get me the room, because I understand that for faculty on a community college campus, finding the room, making the reservation, who's printing the flyers, who has the printer ink, all of those things are additional barriers. So if I can alleviate any of those pieces, it is helpful to the partnership that I know that ahead of time, and I seek to mitigate as many of those things as possible. So for me, whenever I'm building those, trying to break the silos, it's not really just about, you know, being more intentional. It really is, I think, gaining a sort of empathy and awareness around what it looks like on the other side of that wall, and coming together in partnership to try to alleviate those areas of tension. I can't tell you how many professors have been like, oh my gosh, you'll make the flyer for us? You know how to do that? Thank you. Like, that's just one less thing they have to worry about, right? But for me, that's how you go about breaking down the silos, and I think the more we can do that, you know, the more transformation we can expect to see.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I've never spoken with a mic, so I don't know if it. Oh,
there we
right
are.
here. This is my first time speaking in front of like this much people. So just to give you a little bit of context, I came from Jordan 7 years ago, and I couldn't find a job, so I was like, okay, I'll get my master's degree. So I got my master's from urban planning from UIC in Chicago, University of Illinois in Chicago, and it did not help me get a job. I remember I had a nervous breakdown, a mini one, in Washington. I relocated from Chicago to Washington in the hopes of getting something in the workforce development field. And I did great on the interview, but then they ended up saying no. So at that point, I was like, oh my God, I've done everything that everyone asked for me. Like, I got the education. I invested my time, my money, my freaking hair. Like, I had my hair fall for like a few years. And it's still not working. What's up? So I started brainstorming solutions. Like, what did I need back in college that could kind of like help me find the path and accelerate and not waste time and not jump from one major to another, not jump from one like, you need to get this skill, or you need to get that skill. Like, I was jumping back and forth. So I actually developed a platform, and I'm not here to sell it, but hearing all of you guys, like, what are you guys doing? Like, you have so many services, but all I'm hearing is that you are the hero. For me, like, you should be like switching it around and make me feel like I'm the hero and you're here to help. So what does that mean is that I need to get on one platform or something and be like, you know, I'm Nancy, I'm 29 years old. That's when I thought about the solution. Now I'm 31, but I'm 29 years old. I have urban planning degree. I have this degrees and these skills. What can I do? And then the system would automatically tell me, okay, Nancy, here's the stuff that we can help you with. Personalized for me, instead of me going to so many workforce development solution centers and figuring out, okay, what skills now should I get, where do I get help? And honestly, like, I mean, I knew English when I came here, but it was so overwhelming. Like, I didn't know where to get help, who to ask. There's so many training everywhere. It's like you said, it's so many silos. It's not like one comprehensive system. And this is where I want to talk to you about the platform that I build, and I'm curious to know how could it help, and if it doesn't help, how can I make it work? So the idea is a student comes into the platform and they take a aptitude and a personality assessment, and using an algorithm, I match them with career that fit their personality. Now, I loved your point of selling dreams. I think this is like the greatest thing that someone can do. Like, basically, you need to have a goal, you need to have a dream, and then work towards it, so you wouldn't, you know, get lost and jump from one hoop to another. So after I match that person or that student with careers, then they can click on the career and they get a comprehensive information, like what exactly, like, I need to know about this career from the perspective of person who have done it like for only 1 year to the perspective of people who have been in it for like 10 years. And once they're like, okay, great, I want to be an urban planner, what's next? So phase 2, from my perspective, from my platform, is to provide them that blueprint. You don't necessarily need to follow that blueprint. You just basically, I suggest you a blueprint, and you might, you know, take off of that game plan. I'm using your words. And so then basically, like, if you want to be an urban planner, here are the soft skills that you need to have, here are the hard skills that you need to have, and I'm not going to, my phase 2 is not developing educational material, but basically partner with people who have already those materials, and I'm just like basically pushing it through the like being on the side and having the student do his journey, and I'm just like pushing it gently on him. Like, okay, you want to have communication skills in the context of urban planning? Here's how you get it. Here's how you learn it. And here's the things that you need to pay attention to while in schools, because a lot of students don't connect between like what they take in school and real life. So like our job should be like, okay, here's how this material, if you're studying something called place, space, and institutions, it's one of my courses in master's program. Like, if you're taking that, here's how it translates into real world. So yeah, blueprint, that's what I'm doing, trying to establish that blueprint and partnering with different institutions so we can, like I said, push the help invisibly, we don't have to make ourselves the hero. I want them to focus on themselves. My question is, obviously, because I'm talking to a lot of you now, like my thoughts is from, okay.
Well, you think of it, Nancy, so you said it's your first time speaking, you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you.
First and foremost.
I want to look at people, so I want to do this.
Yeah. And your comments, I really appreciate what you're saying and making the student, that person, the hero, right? Like, how do these systems do that? I think that's such a great point that also was made here.
If I could add something. I think that's one of the emphases behind competency-based education, right? So as students enter a competency-based education portfolio or programming, they actually do that self-discovery. Like, one of the classes I teach is a competency-based education approach. I'm teaching Introduction to Health Sciences courses this semester. One of the things I have my students do is look at job descriptions, right? Embedded within the course. Let's look at job descriptions. You want to go in this particular field? Let's look at the job descriptions. Let's look at the requirements of the job. Let's look at because there's only a right decision you can make, right? You can rightly decide you want to do this or rightly decide you don't. And it's better that you find out early because it keeps you on the right path toward a career that you're interested in, as opposed to killing excessive time figuring out that this is something that you're not into. So I think that's part of the process of competency-based education, where we give students that time to not only explore, but also appreciate the different values of work, the different values that are associated with different occupational pursuits and work that is out there to be done. So I think you're on the right track with your platform, but I think that's something that the competency-based education route does as well, in terms of making sure students intersect with information that will help them propel their career forward, as well as think about, hey, is that me? And if that's not me, what do I need to gain in order to do that? So one of the things I have my students do is do an introspective look at the job description and their own asset-based inventory. Don't ask them to give it to me, not an assignment to turn in. Do it yourself. If there are things that are missing, what are the classes that we offer at the college that offer those skills? What does this encourage them to do? Look at our college catalog. Look at their ed plan. If you don't have an ed plan, why don't you have an ed plan? Right? So it's in that competency-based education, expecting them, building in the capacity, one, appreciating that all our students can learn, and two, if they're guided, they can pick up on the guidance that they're given to make the right decisions, to lead them into correct pathways, to find employment opportunities that are well suited toward them, or make the best positive decision in terms of looking at economic opportunities. What is your timeline? Other question I ask students. What is your timeline? Are you in immediate need for work, or do you have years to play with? If the need is immediate, what are the programs and structures and services that are available at the institution that can get you into a job now that allow you to come back and continue your education?
So we are at time, but I'm going to also, Stephen Chung is our next speaker, and his team, I'm going to ask, Jermaine, that you also connect with Nancy afterwards, because there's something that the team I want to make sure you connect with. So
Okay, thanks.
we do have to move on, so I apologize. I do see one more hand up, but I've been told that we have to move on. So if you could join me in giving a round to our panelists today.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jessica, and our panelists for that wonderful discussion. Let's give them another round of applause, please, as they exit. All right. Well, for the last segment of the conference, we're delighted to bring to the stage another dear friend of PCC and to the Los Angeles workforce and economic development community, Stephen Chung. Stephen Chung is currently the Executive Vice President of LAEDC and the President of World Trade Center Los Angeles. He has recently also been announced as the new Chief Executive Officer for LAEDC beginning in the new year. In his current role, Stephen leads investment attraction to the LA County region on behalf of both LAEDC and WTCLA, and facilitates successful location of new businesses, projects, and deals from both international and U.S. investors into the region. He also supports international trade and international connections for organizations based in LA County. Prior to his current role, Stephen Chung was the Secretary General of International Trade and Foreign Affairs for Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, and was responsible for managing policies and programs related to the Port of Los Angeles World Airports, international affairs, and global trade. In this role, he was the lead organizer for Mayor Garcetti's previous international trade missions to Mexico, China, Korea, and Japan. Furthermore, Chung implemented the city's strategic plan to make Los Angeles a global capital of clean technology by building the infrastructure to support research, development, and manufacturing with key partners. Currently, Chung is the Director of International Trade for the Port of Los Angeles, the busiest container port in North America, and was responsible for developing programs to increase trade through the Port of Los Angeles and facilitate goods movement through the Southern California region. We've asked Stephen to join us today to share his own reflections on our issues, share a bit about his vision for 2023 and beyond, and maybe provide some motivation to us as we work to form a better and more meaningful collaboration. Welcome, Stephen, and I'll hand you the...
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. like Jessica, as I was listening to the intro, I thought, who wrote that? And I just realized I did. That's really long. At the same time, it actually, you know, as I was listening to the speakers before, it made me reflect a little bit in terms of how I got here, because to hear this transition that's coming forth spoken out loud, it really kind of reminded me. And I actually, Eric, I didn't get a chance to share this with you. As I was driving onto campus today, I realized that PCC was the first college campus I've ever went on. And I remember back then how lost I was and how impressed and how just inspired I was. As a child of an immigrant, as a first generation student, college student, I didn't think I belonged. And today, to be here, to be your keynote, it really hit me as I was listening to all the speakers in terms of that path. And as Nancy was asking a question, it also kind of reminded me, even after I got my degree, my bachelor's degree in psychobiology, I came back to campus after I graduated because I didn't have a job and I didn't know where to go. And I started applying for dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs and got zero return, zero response, and which is really defeated. I was so desperate that I decided that I needed to, the only way out, the only way I could get a job is to audition for American Idol back then. I can't sing, but I was so desperate. So with all that said, is that as we're looking at it, I think sometimes we're all a bit lost in terms of what that direction is. But to see this room and to know that there are folks also joining us online streaming that are dedicated to the future of our students and our potential workers of the future, that means so much. And I wish that back then I knew there this community that come together. So for that, I want to thank everybody in this room and thank all the workforce development community for coming together to make sure there is a future for folks like myself when I was younger and for folks like Nancy that we really care about what's going to happen next. That said, I'm going to go back to one of the things that Jessica mentioned before. It's not my place, but you asked a question, so I'm going to jump in to answer that question as well about Desmond Tutu's phrase about, you know, kind of eating an elephant one bite at a time, right? One, I don't recommend eating an elephant because they're endangered, so we shouldn't do it. But second, I do think that going back to what Dr. Jez was saying before, it's about that big goal really should about building space to really cultivate the engagement so that we can have these systems. And for me, one of the biggest challenges that we have in front of us is that we have so many different ideas and so many different platforms, but through time, they basically go their own direction. Can you imagine if we can basically build on each other year after year, month after month, person after person? 5 years, 10 years later, this system will be so large that everybody would know about the power of the community college system here in Los Angeles and throughout California. But a lot of times it's because we don't know those opportunities. And that's why you have a kid, an Asian immigrant kid, coming on campus into PCC and just being completely wowed by what's in front of him, but yet he doesn't know how to do it. But if we have that collaboration and that system together, we can do so much more. So that should actually be my ending. But I'm just going to start with that first and then go into basically what I want to talk about today, which is really to set the stage about the system that we have in front of us. What's happening to our economy? What are some of the potentials when it comes to this economy? And what can we do together as a region to make sure that we have a robust talent development system for the future of our economy? Stepping back a little bit, I think we sometimes forget who we are as Angelenos and what we have here in Los Angeles and Southern California as well. Many of you guys probably have heard that Los Angeles, or actually California is now becoming the 4th largest economy in the world. And it couldn't happen without a region like Los Angeles where we're so robust. Both LADC and the UCLA's Anderson Forecast Center estimated that just about $815 billion last year was the GDP for the county of Los Angeles. That's the size of a nation. Did you know that that GDP is larger than larger than most countries except for 19 countries. So we would be the 19th largest economy in the world. Our economy is larger than Saudi Arabia or Norway or Belgium. I mean, that's the size of our economy. And we're able to do so is because of our population. As we're looking at it, we've always had about 10.2 million population. Recently, we've dropped. That number is now under 10 million because of COVID, because of a number of different changes. But as we're projecting the future by 2026, that number is going to continue to decline. This is going to add and exacerbate some of the issues that we talked about, including enrollment in the community college system as well. And to your right-hand side, you'll see the demographics is also changing. As we're seeing Los Angeles is becoming more and more diverse. As many of you already know, Los Angeles is one of the most diverse regions in the entire world, with over 224 languages spoken, representing 140 nationalities. And as we're looking at this, this is our strength. This is our what we're able to market. I think as Dr. Young was mentioning before, we can't look at ourselves as just a Los Angeles, a regional economy. This is really a global economy. So we have our rightful place in the global market as well. But this is what our students and our workers and our talent system can really benefit from in the future. I'm going to talk a little bit about the business side as well. As you're looking at it, these are the employment numbers with the traded clusters in the industries, as well as the average wage that's available based on the information that we have. At the same time, we have, you can see about 244,000 businesses that have employees. There's actually over a million businesses here without employees, just basically individual companies that doesn't have any employees. Combined together in this entire region, you can see the establishments and the business establishments, employment, and basically what the sector is looking like. This is just to set the stage. What I want to do now is talk a little bit about the current economy on national perspective, what that impact is for Los Angeles as a whole, so that we can see what opportunities there are in the future. So, we all know things are getting expensive. Consumer price index is creeping up, and we'll find out what happened after today's election, whether that's going to have any direct impact, any changes. But I don't think anybody right now, as we're looking at the economist projection, that consumer price index is going to drop significantly in the immediate future. And with that, you can also see the types of pricing, right? Food, housing, and energy continues to creep up, especially energy really jumping up. And it's been fluctuating based on a number of different factors, international and domestic issues combined. And as we're looking at it, part of the reason why the global why the consumer price index and inflation is so high is because of various issues related to COVID that really impacted our global supply chain. Over the last 2 years, you've been hearing a lot about the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, and how congested we are. So as Leslie was introducing me, she mentioned that I used to work at the Port of Los Angeles. So years and years ago, at the Port of Los Angeles and everybody at the Port of Long Beach, we've been screaming on top of our lungs saying we need more investment into the infrastructure at the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, so that we don't get to this issue. Well, finally, people are listening. And because of that, there's more investment coming into this region, and you can see that the supply chain, the pressure is actually going down. So you've been hearing all the bad news about the 100 ships that's waiting outside of Los Angeles. Did you know as of today there's about 4 ships waiting? No news about that, but that's a good thing because this is going to help with our congestion. Also, it's going to hopefully help with our pricing as well. Fed rates, you guys have been all hearing about this as well because they're trying to control, the federal government's trying to control the inflation. They're utilizing the Fed rates. It's been increasing by 3/4 of a point multiple times. They've done it 3 times already. So as it's increasing, this is going to have an impact on the housing costs and our also just basically our overall economy. All of that said, this is what's happening with our GDP as a nation over the last few years. And you can see the last 2, we've been seeing a decrease in our GDP, which is definitely alarming. And I think Dr. Jesser also mentioned before that this is, as we're looking into it, we're not expecting to see that this is going to be a robust economy going into 2023. Consumer sentiment, I think a lot of folks are a bit pessimistic about basically whether they can have the same purchasing power, and basically this will also have an impact on the retail sector alongside with a lot of other sectors as well. That's the national stage. What does that mean to the local economy and in Los Angeles? For those of you who've heard me speak about this before, this is the unemployment number in Los Angeles as of September. We have about 4.5 million people employed in Los Angeles County. But I wanted you to look around March, April of 2020. That's when COVID hit. And in those months, you can see this sharp drop. Los Angeles County, we used to say 772, but we have actually adjusted that number when we got information from EDD. Los Angeles County in 2 months lost 784,000 jobs in 2 months. Los Angeles County alone. Over the last 2 years, we've recovered about 91%, so we're about 70,000 jobs short of where we were before the pandemic. But it's looking at the market that we said before, this is a very precarious situation as we're going into the new year. And you can see the employment number's been creeping down, which is a good sign for us, but you can see LA County is still above California and above the US as well. Sectors. This is a month-to-month change in jobs by industry for Los Angeles region. You can see just from last month, you've been seeing some improvement and increase in educational services, government professional services, food and service and drinking places. But at the bottom, you can also see in retail, trade, manufacturing, construction, information, those numbers are declining. I want to highlight the retail trade. That's a big, big red flag for us. Usually right before the holidays, you can see people staffing up to basically get ready for the holidays. We're right around that time and that number's decreasing, which indicates a couple of things in terms of what we said about the consumer confidence and as well as the retail market in terms of what they're projecting in the future. However, looking at year to year, we're better than last year. Since the last year to this year, you've seen a lot of increases all the way across into every single sector except for government. This has contributed to a number of different factors, including early retirement. But as we're moving forward, you can see some good news. And then when you look at pre-pandemic to now, you see a mixture. The blue section above, you've seen those are the industries that have grown to better than what their numbers were before the pandemic, and the ones underneath are the ones that have yet to recover from the pre-pandemic. On the very, very bottom is food service and drinking places. As you can imagine, after the pandemic, we have not fully recovered, especially with the hospitality and accommodation services. Manufacturing, government, accommodation, wholesale trade, these are all sectors to really pay attention to. At the same time, we want to basically look at the future of work, right? We have to look at the future industries that we can have better bets with. So you can see transportation, warehousing, motion picture, sound recording, information construction, healthcare, and social assistance. Those are all potential great sectors to increase in job numbers and job opportunities. Now, let's look at the job posting, the numbers in terms of the number of jobs that are available as we're going through. It's been increasing somewhat over the last few months as we're creeping up. However, in recent months, those numbers have been decreasing, which again indicates basically what the market is showing us. And our LADC team, our research team, has forecasted that it's going to be a pretty flat structure when it comes to job increases over the next few years. Those numbers will definitely change after the election and after the end of this year. We're going to keep updating that information, but based on the information we have last month, this is what we're projecting. And also when it comes to the LA County's growth and our county product or GDP, you can see in 2022, it's going to be remaining about 3.2, but 2023 going into it, it's going to be relatively flat. All of that said, it gives us the context of what the market is telling us. Then what does it mean for LA? What do we do about it? What's going to be in the future? The good thing is LA is a very diverse market with a lot of different industries. So we're able to withstand a lot of different global impact that a lot of other regions might not be able to do. Our aerospace defense, space exploration sector continues to grow, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's Blue Origin, whether it's Virgin Galactic, there's operations that's going to basically help us expand those career paths in the future. Bioscience and life sciences continues to grow. We have now over 90,000 jobs in this very sector, and it continues to grow. And on average, the salary there is about $92,000. So it's a very lucrative industry. Digital media entertainment, gaming, esports, sports entertainment, which I'll talk a bit about a bit later, continues to be dominant here. Hollywood, of course, is going to be dominant, but the thing is, during COVID, streaming has become extremely important, and because we're the content capital of the United States, and as Martin was mentioning, the arts and culture aspect, I think this is a very good sector to really invest in, especially since we have the geography, we have the supply chain, and we have the talent to really build up that system. Advanced transportation, as we're moving forward, we're seeing a lot of different regulations coming forth when it comes to environmental sustainability. sustainability, which means we have to invest in electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles. Los Angeles has a market, California has a market, so we need to continue to double down to make sure that we're investing in advanced transportation. The ocean and blue economy, which ties in with our trade and logistics sector, we're next to the ocean. As we're looking at climate change, as we're looking at various things that are happening, there are a lot of great technology and a lot of new opportunities available in those sectors, underwater robotics, aquaculture, you name it. Trade and logistics, that's what we were mentioning before. It's really impacting our region because this is really the international trade center of the United States, with over 40% of ocean-going cargo coming into the United States handled right here by Los Angeles alone. And then manufacturing. I do have to highlight this. Manufacturing productivity has gone up during COVID. However, the employment number has gone down, which means that automation and digitalization and Industry 4.0 is having huge impact on this sector. So the job skill sets will be different, but the number of jobs will also possibly continue to decline. So this is a sector that we have to watch very carefully in terms of how do we make sure that our future workers are ready to be in that sector so that Los Angeles can continue to be one of the largest manufacturing centers in the United States, which, by the way, a lot of people don't know about. Okay. Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach. The good news is the numbers are high. We've actually surpassed 20 million TEUs. These are 20-foot equivalent units, so 20-foot cargo boxes out there. And that number has been climbing over the last 2 years. Over the last few months, it's actually been dipping and stabilizing a little bit, so it's not growing as much as it did before. So as we're transitioning into this new market, are we going to be continuing to buy more equipment and more products that are manufactured, for example, in Asia? During COVID, there was a huge demand. That's why you have the congestion issue. A lot of folks are not able to travel. They have extra spending, so what they do, they bought yard furniture, gym equipment, so it's all coming from Asia into the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, causing that congestion issue. So that's going to be a huge factor that we have to consider as we're looking in terms of the port congestion issue and how that's going to impact the future. But the Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach, and the entire warehouse and logistics system continues to be one of the most dominant industries for this entire region. When we talk about cargo, we can't forget we have air cargo as well. About $130 billion worth of goods come out through LAX every single year. Additionally, I want you to look at the very right-hand side, which is the 48 million total passengers in 2021. Really high, right? What if I told you in 2019 we had about 88 million passengers? That's a huge drop. That's the reason why our hospitality, accommodation sector have suffered, because we have not been able to bring back the tourists to come in. I'll talk about the opportunities, but this is a huge challenge for us because until this is recovered, Los Angeles continues to be a very great market for international and domestic visitors as well. And we have a lot of great services that's tied in, again, back in the arts and culture. Folks are coming here to Los Angeles. Folks who don't know this, a lot of folks don't know this, but Los Angeles is actually the city with the most museums out of anywhere in the United States. And so a lot of folks come here for the Grammys Museum. They come here for the various museums that are here, along with, the Harry Potter rides and, all the different things that are happening right here in Los Angeles. So we definitely want to bring that back and bring it back to the 88 million or 90 million passengers per year. The other thing to really focus on as well is, I forgot who mentioned it earlier, small businesses and startups. 92% of all LA companies have less than 20 employees. And of that, about 87% of them have actually less than 9 employees. So a lot of small businesses are here, and these small businesses are now growing because of the ecosystems that are here. A lot of the investments, the VC investments, are now coming into Los Angeles more and more, creating a lot more opportunities to scale. However, these opportunities now are not always available, especially to our communities of color and women entrepreneurs. And that's why these ecosystems that we're mentioning before needs to be built to make sure that we're investing in entrepreneurs of color as well as women entrepreneurs to make sure that we have an equitable recovery system. But you can see that for our ecosystem value, it's close to $300 billion that's already invested in this entire region. So we have a lot of great sectors, whether it's consumer, health, fintech, software, enterprise, it's all there. And so there's a lot of opportunities here. And so with that, we have some small startups that's been popping up here in Los Angeles. It's just a sample of the type of companies that can grow, like Riot Games or SpaceX or Hulu or Ring. Small companies started in people's garages that ended up being sold to Amazon for $1 billion, like Ring, right? It's all coming out of the Los Angeles region, and this is just a small sample of what we can do together. Now, I was mentioning sports entertainment as a major sector for us. So we already know these are the great teams that are here. We're, I think, one of the top 2 sports centers in the United States, but we also have all these amazing games that are coming into this region. People are focused on the Olympic Games, the Paralympic Games, which is great, but what about the FIFA World Cup? What about WrestleMania? What about US Open? What about Rugby World Cup? You know, we're gonna be the sports capital entertainment center for the United States for the next decade. And folks are looking at only from the game sector in terms of the sports, right? But what about the stadiums that are built? And when people are flying here from LAX, they're now, hopefully in 2027, 2028, can take the train to downtown where they're going to stay. They can go to Westwood. They can go anywhere in the Los Angeles region to basically do all these different things. You don't want them to go and basically bring out their mobile phone and have 15 different applications so they can get ticketless mobile entry for every single one of these venues. Someone has to create an app that basically ties everyone together. Who's going to control the data? Cybersecurity. Who's going to do the payment processes, right? What about environmental sustainability? The Rose Bowl, for example, is 100 years old. They're going to basically need to do some environmental upgrade. Who's going to do that? These are all great contracting opportunities and job opportunities for our future workers. So we think of this particular sector as a huge potential for us as well. Speaking of infrastructure, we know that we have Measure M, Measure R, $122 billion that will be spent on this region on transportation. Metrolink is spending another $10 billion. LAX going through a $14 billion renovation. Additionally, we're going to get some additional funding coming from the state and federal government. That money coming in will basically help stimulate our economy the way that the Tiger granted back in 2008, 2009 during the last recession. So to coordinate all those efforts is going to be very important. And lastly, international trade. As we're mentioning before, Los Angeles is a global city. We have a lot of international coming to Los Angeles to open up operation. You can see basically there are over about 5,000 foreign-owned establishments in Southern California, Los Angeles region alone, and they support 177,000 good-paying jobs here in this region. Many of them don't know the power of the community college district. How do we engage them to make sure that they know to recruit, to partner, to make sure that they're part of this entire system? So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm not going to go over all the details, but these are the importance of why industry engagement is going to be so important for us. It bridges the gap between the demand and also the supply. As we're mentioning, there are a lot of employers that are looking for skilled workforce, and they need to know that the community college system can be a source for that. Unfortunately, especially because a lot of the international companies are not familiar, they don't know, but there are a lot of local companies that also do not know, including, as I was mentioning, the 92% of LA companies who have 20 or less employees because they're smaller. Sometimes they don't know how to activate these great resources. And they're clusters and everything that we're talking about, but one of the things I really want to emphasize is really that pipeline, right? If we can build on top of each other and basically continue this robust engagement system, then we're not going to create these silos that we've been talking about. And also when it comes to best practices, I think I'll share this slide with you. I know we're running really tight on time, so I'm not going to go to every single one of those. But really, I think it's about that partnership. How do we make sure that the employers are engaged with the faculty here, but also to be able to be responsive to the student needs? How do we make sure that we're focused on creating those opportunities, especially to our BIPOC communities and for our women workers who've been left out of the recovery system over and over and over again? And lastly, in order for us to do so, I'm going to plug that previously we've done a Power Economic Opportunity Report with the community college system, which is a great way for us to identify the growth industries and the pathways and how do we get there. And with that information, going all the way to what Nancy was mentioning before, Jessica Kukim, when she was with LADC, started this really amazing partnership called Gladio LA that really puts a lot of that information, career pathways, how do you, basically the information that Nancy, you were talking about, it's actually somewhat available, maybe not as robustly as you think with your host system, but there's a lot of information and we really encourage everybody to get involved so we can put all the accessible information for everyone to access. So this way, it creates a system of engagement that we've never had before. With that said, I think that's the end of my presentation, and it's the time. 12 o'clock. Okay.
I mean, that was kind of impressive, right? Like, right? And I thought I talked fast. I was watching him. I was totally inspired. I'm like, hey, I could go faster. I could have gone faster. So we get here. Oh, wow. Okay, well now, yeah, that's just extra. We're just going to tab, there we go. Hi. Okay, well, so let's give another round of applause to Stephen, and also for all of today's speakers, panelists, Jessica for moderating. A big thank you to all of you for coming out today. And again, thank you to all of you for coming out, braving the weather. I can see that we have the A students in the room because a lot of folks didn't show up. But they're watching. I'm sure they're watching. I'd like to turn your attention to the screen here. We have a handy-dandy QR code there. If you use your phone to the kids like that. You put your phone on that, and it'll take you to a link tree with all kinds of cool links. We have the EWD website that takes you and tells you all about the different pillars and initiatives that EWD has. It'll also take you to the link for the EWD podcast, which if you're not tuning in, you should be, and also the EWD Pulse newsletter if you'd like to read that to keep informed of all this stuff and all the other stuff. There's also a survey. I'd like to plug that. We do listen to your feedback, so we'd appreciate it. So please take time to do that. And also, I wanted to thank our team of volunteers for their hard work, for everyone involved in putting this conference together today. We super appreciate it. Again, thank you for everyone who came. And that's it. That's our program. Thank you.